Obviously, I wish I could see my house again, my gardens again. I wish I could see, and the children wish they could see their cats again. But we are all together now. Our whole household is complete. I'm haunted by the age of my mother, what will happen, where, God forbid, anything to happen to her. There are worries involved, but I'm not going to place myself in an arrestable situation again. I think you know, Donna, the toll it took on my health to be confronted by armed police officers and be told I was being held under the Terrorism Act. Me, under the Terrorism Act. And then to discover, only at the end of the interrogation, 4 hours interrogation by armed officers, that my good wife had been held for 5 hours.
Yeah, just want to start spreading some awareness about what
by armed police
going
officers
through while reacting to
questioning about the Palestinian colors in her fingernail. And then to discover, and I told the police officer there and then, you just caused my removal from the country because my wife didn't even want to be here. She's only here because of me. She's only in this country because
turn
of
my
me and our
mic
3
up a little
British
bit
children.
just so you guys can hear me more.
Well, she's not going to live in a country where armed policemen are going to hold her for 5 hours and interrogate her in such an infantile way, on such absurd pretexts. So she will leave, and if she leaves, my kids have to leave, and if my wife and kids have to leave, so do I have to leave. And I saw assurances, informally and formally, that the same thing would not happen to me again, but assurances came there none. So whilst it's a beautiful thought that you had, I think just wish us the best in our exile and a speedy end to the premiership of Sir Keir Starmer. Thank you, Donna. Now tell us, how is the U.S.-Iran situation looking to you in Panama?
What I wanted to say, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Donna. Yeah, the world's listening.
Okay, it was, I checked it, and it was actually the Chris Hedges interviewing Colonel Wilkerson, but both of them are dear friends of mine. Well, anyway, Colonel Wilkerson said one of the motives for this war, it's very little discussed, he said, is that China, now there's a word that you will probably know, George, that I don't know. I've heard of the China Belt and Road Initiative, but he was saying a word I could not hear. I think it sounded like Space Road Initiative, but it's the trade routes essentially. Here it is. I wrote it down. It mirrors Alexander the Great's route, and it's the Persian Gulf going through, let's see, the Persian Gulf, and then ultimately it will go through Iran, and they will be able, like now, Chinese goods take, for the route that they currently have, it takes 2 to 3 days approximately, okay? They will be able, if they get this Persian Gulf, through the Caucasus to Europe, okay, if they get that the Chinese manage to get that, right, it will take only 16 hours. So obviously there's lots and lots of money to be made and convenience also to get this. And he said it mirrors Alexander the Great's route, the Persian Gulf through to the Caucasus to Europe. So he thinks that is one of the motives for the war.
It is. And I wholly endorse that thesis. The centrality of Iran to the new emerging world order where Russia, China, and Iran, and economically speaking, not politically, India, the emergence as an economic superpower of India, the emergence of a superpower in Iran, and heaven knows we're seeing that displayed every single hour of every day now in this war of Iran, the defeat by Russia of 27 NATO countries who've been waging war against Russia ever since the 2014 outbreak of coup d'etat and war in the Ukraine, the vaulting superiority that has to be seen to be believed of the People's Republic of China. I mean, now that you can go there visa-free, you'd be mad if you could do it, not to go to China. And if you go to China, I guarantee you that your jaw will drop open at what you see there. So this new world order, based on the BRICS, with the Belt and Road Initiative and this connectivity that you described, that Pepe Escobar very often talks about, this leaves Europe as a backwater. It leaves the United States as a backwater. And they're determined to stop it. They were determined to put a puppet regime in control of Iran, like the puppet regimes they have, or rather had, on the Arabian side of the Gulf. But they have spectacularly failed. The tables have turned, and I don't believe they're going to turn back again. Donna, thank you for that great call. Hadi is in Maryland, who has a reply to Terry in Alabama's call. Hadi, welcome.
Hi, George.
Hi, go ahead, quickly.
Yes, just responding to Terry from Alabama. I'm somewhat almost offended by what Terry said about our.
You need to turn your radio down or TV down, because that's what's putting you off the time lag.
Trump's using proclivities.
Hadi, we'll need to come back to you because the hour is late and a lot of people want to get on, and you're pausing every time you hear yourself coming back to yourself. Comments. Phil Chen says, tricky poll question. I think international law has been dead for at least 2 decades. I argue more. I'm with the Yugoslavia point. Sean Bebbington says there was no international law to begin with. He's even more pessimistic than me. Stuart Seaton says, what international law stopped the Gaza genocide, the Iraq genocide? Good point. Neil GZ sends £5 British. Thanks, Neil. Trump and Netanyahu didn't kill international law. They hit the final nail in its coffin. Happy Easter. And CFC LOL, LOL, Mr. Galloway, sir, the US does not commit war crimes. It defines what a war crime is, funds the court that enforces it, and declines to join that court. This is the rules-based international order. That's a terrific comment indeed. It's really Alice through the looking glass. Words mean exactly what I think that they mean. Heather is in Alabama. My goodness, we're big in Alabama tonight. Heather wants to talk about Iran's Lego videos, which are amazing if you haven't seen them. Heather, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Very clear. Go ahead.
Oh, very good. I would like to say here in Alabama in the United States, the southern United States, that the Lego videos that are reaching to liberating the Native Americans, the African Americans, all the Epstein
mention.
Island
That's what's up.
victims. They're making a great hit.
I'm gonna
And
turn
I
it down
think
a little.
they're
I'm just realizing
doing
how
a lot.
loud that is.
I know it's war propaganda from Iran, but
Yo.
I think it's making a really good statement here in at least
Okay, I
in
just
my
realized
opinion,
I
in the
had some
south
things
of the
doubled up.
United States.
Well, that's
Learning as we
a
go.
very important testimony,
Growing better
Heather.
from here on out.
It is war propaganda, but their war propaganda is a lot better than the U.S. war propaganda. The U.S. and Israel are literally defenseless when it comes to the meme war and when it comes
Oh,
to the
jeez.
social media war. That's why they're so desperate to
I forgot
clamp down on
a single
social
letter in
media
my link tree
because
stuff.
you know, you can't
There we go.
defend the indefensible. If it's indefensible, you can't defend it. And what Trump has done is indefensible. And no creative person is going to shame themselves and cheapen their art by putting pen to paper or whatever you say in the digital age by defending it. And therefore, the field is open. And another of the extent to which they have underestimated Iran, they never saw this coming. They thought the Iranians were primitive people. They didn't realize that the Iranians were creating the finest works of art ever seen on the planet 5,000-6,000 years ago.
Yeah. Speaking of all that, have you learned about the copper swords from the Great Lakes? Like, people are saying some of the first swords in history.
Film. He doesn't know art or literature. He's never read a book, never written a book. You've never seen him with a book. You've never heard him quote from a book. He is a semi-literate individual, a huckster. And the Iranians are not.
Man.
And so
Yeah,
the
honestly, from a
Iranian
native
social media
perspective,
performance in
I would say that a lot of these people, whether left or right, aren't necessarily in support of natives. I mean, they're all full of themselves. A lot of the stolen culture, the whole conquered people stuff is so ridiculous because you got, people are starting to prove that our language relics are literally all over the world. Great Lakes copper specifically all over the world. So it's just really
and why I
interesting.
was surprised about Terry.
The total lies of history that we're taught, like Native American languages, were very recently legalized. Native slaves made up a majority of slaves throughout the Americas in totality. Like the American history and narrative around that is solely focused in the Southeast, and leaves out Canada, slavery of natives, the West and frontier slavery of natives, all of South America and Central
More
America.
badly
It's
in the
it's really
south, the
starting to
deep
change the
south
narrative
of
as
the
more
United States. But
academic natives
maybe
are
I
really
need
coming
to
around
wise
and
up.
really publishing
Maybe
things.
the south ain't what it used to be. Social media roundup. I'm closing the poll now. We didn't get to the record, but we did get to 55,000 votes cast. And 97, 94, 96, 94 was the final tally. That's a big opinion poll, and that margin is truly phenomenal. Now, as we continue to recognize more of the people who make this program possible, the support we receive is what keeps Moats going strong and independent. So a big thanks tonight to Juan Zurita, Hussein Darwich, Christopher Conway, our old friend George J. Ashkar Jr., and Dan Raj. A big thanks to these, our biggest donors this evening, but to every one of you who
Have to make
has
a fancy
or
little
is going to donate by the end
animation
of the night.
thing for
If
the
you want to
news
get
thing
involved,
like that.
just go to moats.tv and press the donate now button. Mahmoud is in Canada on Iran and Palestine. Mahmoud, welcome.
Thank you so much, George. Happy Easter to you, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you and your viewers a testimony and a first-hand incident from the past. We're going back around the time where at the onset of the Iranian Revolution, when the Iranian Shah was ousted and Ayatollah Khomeini rose to power. I happened to be present at a rally in support of the revolution. And I was way too young at the time to understand the complexity of world politics. However, one phrase, George, that the crowd was chanting at the time repeatedly in Persian, and by the way, I don't speak Persian. The phrase was, Amruz Iran, Farda Palestine. And translated in English, it meant today Iran, tomorrow Palestine. It's just phenomenal how they stayed so true to the cause, George, over the years. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
It truly is, and no, thank you. It truly is phenomenal and unique. They are, for 47 years, the only people on the
what the
earth
hell is Pam Bondi talking
who have
about? Guns,
consistently
gangs, and drugs on
done
reservations
everything
in
that
an
they
Indian
possibly
country, bro.
could
You go to
to
any
come to
city
the
in the
rescue
Americas and
and work for the
non-natives
liberation
from all
of the Palestinian
non-native
people.
nationalities and
And they have done
identities
it
are all in
with
gangs
hardware.
somehow, all
They
involved
have done
in
it
different
with
crime
software.
and drug
They have
running.
done it with
Natives
their
don't
hearts.
make
They
the
have done it
drugs.
with their money.
Like
And
natives
no
who
other
are
country
addicted
in the whole
in those
world can say
situations
that they
like get
have done the
drugs
same.
from
No one can
non-natives.
say that they have done all that they could do,
Plain
even
and
if
simple.
that in many
It's
cases would have
absolutely
been
like
little, but
abhorrent
they
to our
didn't
like
even do
culture
the
in a
little.
lot of native ways.
And just this evening, I think the Iranians put one of the captured pilots on TV, and the spokesperson of the Islamic Republic said, we will exchange him for 10,000 freed Palestinian prisoners. They feel deeply in their heart their fidelity to the Palestinian cause. And it's one of the reasons why so many people in the world are rooting for them. Imad is in Manchester, and he wants to talk about Donald Trump, and he's got a point. Go ahead, Imad.
Hi, good evening. I'm a big fan of you, George. I just want to say it feels like a bullfight, and
Anyway, I'm going to start working on some
Iran is
working with Hermes while we listen to this.
matador, well trained, and the bull is Trump. And with apology to all bulls, actually. He's unhinged, and someone must remove him from power. And I think the best is the American peoples and maybe the U.S. Army, but he should not be staying in power because he's destroying not only Iran and the Middle East, but he's destroying his own country, the U.S. He's accelerating its degradation. I mean, it's already on path of losing the status of being an empire, but he's accelerating that in a way that is damaging the lives of people, even in the U.S. So that's my...
Well, amen to that, Imad. I've been saying that I'm waiting for the flap of white coats as the psychiatrists come to take him away to the funny farm, or the march of military books as the top brass of the military place him under
I don't think I've ever
arrest.
heard that. That's a good one.
It seems we
That's
cannot
hilarious.
depend on either of those outcomes. It seems that Trump has so filled his cabinet with chinless, boneless, spineless wonders that no possibility of them invoking the 25th Amendment, whereby they could legally remove him from power, is likely to happen. We heard earlier that the next president, J.D. Vance, is suffering from more or less a clinical depression. So we're not likely to find relief from that perspective. And therefore, I think the markets and the oil price are going to have to drive everyone to such despair that the entire world rises up against him, and the American position becomes unsustainable. One thing I'm sure of is that the Iranians will never stop fighting. They have beaten far smarter invaders than Donald Trump. Donald Trump ain't no Alexander the Great, and they have sustained their civilization for millennia, and they're not going to give it up to this cheap huckster, Donald Trump. Some more comments. Knowledge is power. Not buying the latest message from Trump. When did you last hear him swear in one of his posts? My bet is on Hog's Breath posting that in Trump's name. Is Trump still breathing? That is a very good question. And the Bashish Day 1184, he's not the Messiah, he's just a naughty boy and a moron to boot. And Abahia 2614, Trump is the comical alley. And RCW 3009 says Trump just accepted Adelson money to stay out of jail. Now he's going to jail. They win everything. Trump gets nothing. And Harley Yellowstone says the founding fathers would vomit if they could see America today. Last call, I suppose, though we might squeeze one more in. Harnan in Amsterdam. Harnan, welcome to the show.
Yes, great being with your show. It's I'm really hopeful to see what your story is, and I hope we can get this story further. And I think we have this orange barbarian in the United States. It's a total disaster. And what can we do in cooperation to get the American people so far that they say, yeah, he has to be removed. And this is a kind of ideological warfare in which I think Iran has a kind of lead, a moral lead, because they're defending themselves, they're defending their culture. And I thought maybe we should build a coalition of the countries and NGOs and media companies who work together and to isolate this Trump regime together with Netanyahu. And that they have so big a moral losing game what they are playing, that the pressure gets so big that they have to stop these atrocities because it's so horrible. It has to stop as soon as possible. And how can we cooperate to make this happen?
Well, I think I think that's a very powerful call. If that is indeed the final call, no Gayatri tonight. She's taking the children back to school. But the situation is catastrophic, first of all, for the Iranian people. And in all our exaltation about the bloody good hiding Israel and the United States are receiving, we should not forget the level of suffering of the Iranian people with their blood and their treasure is immense. The fact that they will bear it and that they will never surrender to it is of some compensation, but not to the individual mother and father that lose their child, or the individual child that loses their parents, their siblings. So it's right that you sober us up by inference to
window
that.
flipping.
The problem
Getting
is
organized here so I can start working on the code
mine,
stuff.
The Netherlands and the UK
get it displayed in the window.
are pretending to be against this war, but actually doing nothing to stop it. In the case of the Netherlands, although your least finest son, the Runt, former Prime Minister of the Netherlands, now General Secretary of NATO, is practically the only significant figure, if he is significant, in the whole world who is openly backing Trump. The Dutchman, Mark Rutte, a childless freak, is ready to see other people's children slaughtered in order to keep his job in a NATO which is fast disappearing from any kind of relevance or validity. But the United Kingdom is fully participating in the war. It is a complete lie that Keir Starmer is not in this war. He is deeply up to his neck in the blood of the Iranian people. The Americans have fallen out of love with Donald Trump. Bigly. He lost for the first time ever his majority support amongst white working class voters. His bedrock, his blue collar bedrock. Today, yesterday, for the first time, he was in negative approval territory. In every other demographic, he is increasingly reviled. He has no chance. Remember, it's only a few months ago, he was threatening to run again, unconstitutionally. He ain't threatening that now. Nobody in their right mind is suggesting 4 more years for Donald Trump. He'll be lucky to reach the end of this term, never mind get elected to another one. You remember all the speculation about Donald Trump Jr., about Ivanka Trump, even about Kushner. There'll be no more Trumps in the White House. They'll be lucky to stay out of the jailhouse. Their dynasty that they hoped to found is now dead and buried. And so the American people have already voted with their feet against Donald Trump. The problem is the Republican Party in the Congress that continues to cling to his coattails. Now, it might be that before November, they decide those coattails weren't at all worth clinging on to any longer. So a week's a long time in politics. November is therefore a lot of weeks, and we'll see how it goes. But in November, there's more chance of me being elected president of the United States than Donald Trump's party holding on to power in the United States Congress. Final call is another legend. It's Sarkar in Glasgow. On you go, Sarkar.
Good evening, George. Thank you so much. George, first of all, full glory to the Iranian bravery. But today I want to talk about a very coward nation and a coward man, Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. This war was never America's war. Trump was one of the biggest stupids to put his nose into it, and now he's neck deep in corruption and in this war and the killing of his own soldiers. If Israel are so brave and they want to fight the Iranians, why don't they put their boots on the ground? Oh, no, wait. Their bravery is fighting people with Palestine who've got bricks in their hands. Their bravery is bombing a small strip of land called Gaza, where people cannot fight back. For all the talk of the idea of bravery, it was their war. They are the ones who instigated it. If you're brave enough, go there, put your boots on the ground. Why should somebody else's father, why should somebody else's husband, brother, son come back in a body bag? When is it finally high time, George, you think Americans should say enough of the blind support to Israel? I'd like to hear your views, George.
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity to do so. The American people have decisively moved against Israel. Israel has overreached itself, and it will never be glad, confident morning for them again. The Israel lobby in the United States is now a busted flush. They are hoping for a period of quiet whereby through other means than AIPAC, which is now toxic, anyone running for election in November as the AIPAC candidate is a guaranteed loser, however many millions they are given. So the Israel lobby is a busted flush in the United States. American Jews, young American Jews, have decisively turned against them. And everybody else, everybody, Republican and Democrat, is now against them. People ultimately realize when they've been had. And boy, have the American people been had. So the final reverberations about all this will be felt for years, maybe decades, will influence politics in Britain and in the United States and elsewhere in the world for decades after this. They committed a crime, but it was worse than a crime. it was a blunder of unimaginable proportions, of earth shaking consequence. And it will shape the rest of my life, your life, and the life of the youngest person watching the mother of all talk shows this evening. That's it, I'm afraid. We'll be back, Gayatri and me, on Wednesday with the midweek mother of all talk shows. God knows what world we'll be looking at if Trump carries out his blood-curdling threats. We might even be looking at a
like and support
war. So,
yeah, why not? Also subscribe.
Wednesday night, 7 p.m. UK. Good night.
All right, y'all. Let's find something else. Oh, I like Wally Rashid. He's pretty cool. I like to have a very diverse left and right viewership. Personally, I really stand firm from my perspective as an Anishinaabe person, a native person in the Americas in the contemporary sense, that the left and right are bad, just plainly. I don't really know how else to say it because you know, from Bush to Obama and Trump and Biden, Kamala, they all caged native families just because they split us up into Spanish, French, and English, and you know, terrorize us in different areas. Doesn't mean that these aren't native people, and these are clearly non-natives of various political parties harming us.
Hey everybody, hope you guys are doing well. You've all probably seen this tweet now. Donald Trump has totally lost it, like went totally unhinged, anything we've seen before. He went on Truth Social today, and he stated this: Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the effing straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. President Donald J.
Did he say
Trump.
that?
I mean,
Oh.
truly, I don't think I've
He
ever
did,
seen
dang.
a president go so manic before. And it makes you wonder, why is he so angry behind it? You know, it seems like he's under a
Weird.
lot of pressure personally. Bernie Sanders, he quoted this. A lot of other politicians did, by the way. 1 month after starting the war in Iran, this is the statement of the President of the United States on
I always
Easter
have,
Sunday. By the way, happy Easter to
3
everybody who celebrates it
IDEs
watching.
open, working
They
on
are
like
they
all
are
sorts
the
of different
ravings
code
of a
stuff all the
these are the
time.
ravings of a dangerous
I just think it's
and
fun to
mentally
create.
unstable individual. Congress has got to act now and end this war. And we all know that, you know, this war is not gonna end anytime soon. Here's the thing: people keep saying, and I mean, genuinely, this is gonna affect us
I have
all
some
very
code
bad,
pulled
because
up for y'all
Iran's not
really
gonna open up
soon.
the strait.
I'm
They're not
just
gonna open up
kinda
the strait. Why would they open up
distracted,
the strait?
listening,
Because
and
they're going to get
getting
their power
organized for
plants
the
bombed and their
stream for the
bridges bombed.
first
Great.
time.
Then the entire world is going to fall into a global depression. What's going to end up happening is Iran is going to respond by knocking out all the energy infrastructure in the region, because they're up against the wall. At that point, why not? Regardless of how you feel about it, that is what they're going to do, because they've stated that
Hey,
themselves.
please
They're going to
go
take the whole
check
world
out
down
my
with
link
them,
tree as
and they're
well. I got
fine
some
making
other
an entire
information
energy
in
crisis
there as
happen,
well
because
about
they have to
just some of the things
establish
going
deterrence.
on with the
If Iran
native kids
decides to open up the
being
strait and subjugate to Trump's wishes and Trump's
labor
demands, what ends up
trafficked and
happening
worse.
is
There's court cases
it makes a
proving
statement, and they recognize that. If
the
they go
worst
ahead and do
case.
it, then what the statement that is made is that the
And
United States
you
can
know, I
bomb Iran
got
in the
really
future.
concerned
Israel can bomb Iran in
recently
the
because
future
I
as
found
much as
out
they
that
want, and it's okay.
with the migrant kids, you know, Spanish speaking natives, you know, fleeing settler terrorism, they're being trafficked via temporary adoption all over the U.S. In every state, they're being found to have been labor trafficked. So after Wally here, we'll watch a video about that.
This whole thing is about. The way Iran establishes deterrence is by deciding to knock out all the energy infrastructure. The threat of doing that is so great that it will make the United States never think about doing such a thing again. And I've talked, if you guys have watched my channel before, I've talked about how countries have to find their deterrence in different ways. Taiwan is a perfect example. Taiwan doesn't have a nuke. Taiwan can't establish deterrence with China that way. And the United States, why does the United States back Taiwan? Is it because it's just a small little island and they feel bad for the people? No. If you know anything about Taiwan, Taiwan has a silicon shield. That's what it's called, the silicon shield of Taiwan. All the world semiconductors, like what, 70% of them are made in Taiwan in one company called the Taiwanese Semiconductor Company. The world recognizes that if anything, if China took over Taiwan fully and, brought it back to the one.
Yeah, so TSMC is a huge focus for the world right now because Taiwan's semiconductor infrastructure was really tested during COVID. The design engineers and end of the line fabrication for these chips is in Taiwan, but a lot of the infrastructure for the machines is built throughout Europe, and it's become a really big, the world's biggest issue, I would probably say, just because it affects everything. And because of COVID and the Taiwanese Strait issues, if you go look it up, uh, China's actually been uh, getting close, or probably may have already accomplished equal chip quality, but all in house, which is something that the rest of the world's market hasn't been able to do. And the US is working with Taiwan to get kind of the same thing going on in the US, in like Ohio and I think Arizona. So it's a really big issue. Serious, the world's biggest issue because it affects everything: vehicles, weapons, computers. It's a big deal. Yeah.
The one China policy and they had full control over it the same way, well, what would end up happening is the world would also fall into, there would be a massive depression, global recession, economy would be tanked because of the fact that they control all the world's semiconductors, basically, which also goes in US tech. So what I'm saying is different countries use deterrence in different ways. And this is what Iran is doing now. This is their form of deterrence. If they had a nuke, they wouldn't be doing this because they would have established deterrence already with the nuke. That would have been enough. So they wouldn't have to have resorted to this. Israel has a nuke, so that's Israel's deterrence. The rich Gulf oil countries have rich oil. That's their deterrence, is their oil. But that's not working out so far because right now Iran is threatening to knock that infrastructure out if the United States targets their oil. What's going to end up happening? This is what I'm going to bet is happening. First off, Donald Trump is so
creating a repo right now of all the agents and different things we're going to test and work with on the stream here.
He's so volatile, unlike any other president before. So the chances of him going through with it are non-zero, which is and that's a massive risk. He's made it a public statement now, and he stated this before, but today he's really, he said Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern that's when everything's going to go to hell. That's when this would begin if Iran didn't just agree and open up the straits the way that the United States wants. What's going to end up happening, and the Iranian president already made a statement today stating, we will only open up the straits once we have once we've gained enough revenue from all the tolls for all the destruction.
Oh yeah, and the stream repository you can find on my GitHub over here in my link tree. So if we do anything cool, you can find it all there.
That the United States has caused with their airstrikes, the U.S.-Israeli airstrikes. I mean, they've been targeting everything. Keep in mind, I think 30, what was it? I read today, is it 30? 30 universities in Iran have been targeted by this. So, they've been, this is, I'm just reading, this is just an Al Jazeera summary.
That's truly horrific because as somebody who has been going to universities and colleges in the United States, I've had a legitimate fear, like easily like more times than I could ever remember, of just sitting in libraries, sections of the universities or colleges, and just worried about some crazy non-native United Statesian coming in and ruining everyone's dreams and aspirations. It's just such a wild reality to think that other students in the world have to worry about worse than that, like what Wally is explaining here. It's truly horrific. Um, I mean, I'm pretty sure I just recently learned that algebra, the like Arab mathematician, is like from Iran, like back when it was like Persian territories and all that. So it's just, they always talk about how natives were savages and this and that, when we're more proving now that the copper swords in the Great Lakes may have been some of the first swords in the world. The mines are more expansive, or as expansive as the mines today. Great Lakes native copper can be found all over the ancient world. I remember learning about that on the History Channel and different things decades ago. So it's like, and they can chemically prove it. So, just to always say people are less intelligent while being just barbaric invaders is just insane. Um, I'm tired of holding back about my feelings about these things, because these people are literally trafficking Spanish speaking native children, have enslaved Spanish speaking natives. If you look up, there's plenty of documentaries about these non-native, especially European settler farmers, utilizing Spanish speaking native labor, and as soon as the season is done, they'll call immigration on them. So the native slave trade never really stopped, and it's just so wild that you know just how barbaric these people have been, all over the world. Even, it's yeah, it's like something out of a bad movie. But we got to keep talking about this. We got to be aware. We got to collectivize and just natives from Greenland to Alaska and Chile. We're waking up, and all the racism and the immigration issues have really caused us to unite more than ever. And yeah, I just want that to be made aware to non-native folk around the globe. I think it's something people don't realize. In these countries, in the Americas, a lot of the non-native academics are waving flags, I guess, if you will, that their birth rates are severely declining, and between Spanish, French, English, and indigenous speaking native people, the jig is up, and between all non-native folk, they specifically work against us. It's been really sad to see uh, uh, everyone clearly uniting about against the original inhabitants of these lands. So yeah, I see all these other people doing their geopolitical rants and stuff. So here's a contemporary native perspective. And I've been in academics the last like 8 to 10 years. I love studies and education and learning about the world. I've been learning all sorts of different languages through Duolingo, which it's been helpful. And I'm actually kind of on my way to also making an AI tool, or just code up with AI or something to make my own language learning tool to learn the other things that aren't on Duolingo, like Farsi and Aramaic, because people have been really slowly proving that natives during and approximately around the old copper culture era um, went eastward, took over areas in Europe and the Middle East, and they're finding DNA relics to prove this. And our language has a lot of wild similarities. And with these more modern understandings of all these migrations and being able to prove stuff with DNA, it explains how, like Anin, in our language is like hello, which Arabic speakers will recognize that. And like the Mormons during their, through their fervor for all of that Abrahamic stuff, they would have learned Aramaic and stuff like that, like John Smith, and finding our copper tablets and gold tablets, which they can now prove were a copper gold alloy, and they used acid to melt away the outer copper layer to make it look gold. That our syllabics in our language, having these similarities and relics and left over in these other lands in ancient times, once you have those understandings, it's those religious zealots during that time looking to be the king and queen or whatever, were led around all of our major business centers, and having Aramaic knowledge, you would be able to translate some of our language. So it's just really wild, the full circle of everything. I think the global geopolitical issues will come all the way back around from American Zionism and the other different branches of all that extremism. It started here pretty much, and I think it's all going to end here.
Iran says U.S. Israeli airstrikes have killed 5 people, wounded 170 at a petrochemical zone, while more than 30 universities have been targeted since the beginning of this war. U.S. Iran escalation could push oil prices toward $200. This is what's going to end up happening. If this happens on Tuesday, oil prices are going to skyrocket. What it does risk is global crude oil prices spiking towards $200 a barrel, pushing countries around the world, including the U.S., towards recession, if not depression. He also suggested that the escalation is unlikely to force Iran to back down, asking, will this escalation scenario then produce Iran capitulation? Highly unlikely, which is exactly what I've been saying. Why would they capitulate? What's the point? I mean, genuinely, you can hate the IRGC as much as you want. I personally, I try to, I'm not the biggest fan of any country. So it's not about that though. But you really have to think, if you were the leader of Iran right now, what would you do? What would you do if you knew you had to establish deterrence? What would you do? Would you capitulate to the demands of the United States right now? No, because you're inviting other airstrikes in the future. If anybody that's really trying to take a strategic approach to it, they wouldn't do it. And guess what? Now you rallied the people behind their government, because these airstrikes, I mean, if you guys have been seeing the protests in Iran now, aside from, the United States media, Western media doesn't want to show it because they don't want people to recognize, to feel that that Iran has garnered up its people and they're very patriotic now, but they're very patriotic right now. And some of the people that have been protesting against Iran's government are now protesting in support of Iran, not necessarily because they like the government, but because they're being attacked by a foreign army. That is the best.
Speaking of all that, it's just so interesting because all this chaos and immigration issues have really revitalized a whole patriotism between French, Spanish, English, and indigenous speaking natives, in a way that, I mean, we have prophecies that are older than non-natives' existence here of uniting. So it's just really interesting to live in a time where people are almost forcing our prophecies to happen of natives uniting, um, and for the global non-native folk. I mean, we're here. We're tired of how they treat us, and uniting. They are talking about taking away our citizenship and native people. We're a not very commonly talked about resource to other nations. We're vast, we're tough, we're educated. We have everything to lose and everything to gain, or nothing left to lose and everything to gain. It's my dad was abused by the government, and my my grandparents were abused by the government and trafficked to factories to work factory labor, the Indian industrial boarding schools. Um, and that's why I'm really upset about the migrant, the Spanish speaking native children being put into these factories and trafficked around, because it's a direct representation of my grandmother and her siblings, and everything that's happened to native peoples. It's happening in front of our eyes right now, and I would just rather be right here trying to talk about it, and let people know that we're here, and bad things are happening to native people still.
Best way to increase patriotism in a country. If right now the United States was getting attacked by a foreign army on U.S. soil, everybody would start setting aside their differences and feel more patriotic because we're getting attacked by a foreign invader. That's how this works. This is how it works. This is why countries benefit from war. Same thing with Israel right now. They benefit from war because otherwise Israel would be falling apart right now. They have so many internal problems, but having an external enemy keeps the country cohesive. It at least allows you to put all of your problems on that one enemy outside that everybody can unite against. And that's what we're going to say here. So this is what's most likely going to happen is if the United States had any, right now Trump's already dug his own grave. So what's going to end up happening is maybe Trump will go through with it. I think he's going to go through with it to a degree. I don't think he's going to go all the way. Meaning I don't think he's going to knock out as much energy infrastructure as he says. Maybe I'm wrong, though. Maybe he actually will, because I think he wants to try to make as much damage to be able to brag about it in Western media and say, see, we showed Iran. We went ahead and we went forward with it, and we told them we were, and we flattened them. And I think he wants enough infrastructure damage to be able to say that. That's what I think he would do. But he doesn't want so much that all of the energy infrastructure, all of their power plants are totally knocked out to the point where he knows Iran is going to respond back by knocking out the entire region and putting the world into a depression. Personally, I think that's what's going to happen. He wants to respond back to hurt them in a way that they would hurt back, knowing that they're not going to hurt back so much that they knock out everything because the United States didn't knock them all out. That is at least one possibility. Another possibility is that he goes totally unhinged. And that's also not a non-zero, because here's the thing. I mean, has anybody been seeing Laura Loomer's tweets recently? This lady has lost it. I mean, I don't want to even say lost it because she never had it to begin with. She's manic. She's truly, psychotic. And if you've been seeing her tweets, she's been saying the most insane things. Now, why does Laura?
Okay, so just I like participating in ceremony and spiritual knowledge from my people, and those thought processes, and just from what he just said, I just feel like somewhere deep down in these settlers' spirits, they know that something is about to happen, or like the end is near of their society, because it's just become really ugly in general. And I mean, from like a totally detached politically, like the extreme butchering of themselves to look a certain way that isn't natural to them, the greed worshiping, just not being from here. Because I've been talking with other native folk about how it seems like when people leave their areas, and this is from more of like a native perspective, I suppose, that they kind of get sick or insane because their genetics have literally been tied to the land. After so long, there's all these different resonant waveforms from the land. There's different radioactive emissions. There's every piece of land and territory just has such specific environmental factors that I think when you're an invader, I think over time, like, you or your kin do become sick in some way, whether it's spiritually, mentally, or physically. Like I grew up in northern Michigan, and native people don't get poison ivy or poison oak. It's just like that's like nature fighting back. But like you know, so it's just as a young person, I just saw it's like, wow, there's like the land accepts me, and that it's just a profound thought process that you know I think there is a big factor in all that, the energies that are put into a land. You know, for example, all the different sacred places the people of the Abrahamic faiths visit. You know, there's these feelings tied to those spaces. So in a similar way, you know, I think it's in the native multi-generational 7 generations perspective, you know, I think when you plan to be an invader, I think it's against that 7 generations of thinking kind of life ways, thinking processes, because there are spaces where people from other lands become sick or otherwise. So it's just yeah, the whole United Statesian uh, religious extremism, I think, is collapsing in on itself, and it's just so wild to see it in real time.
Laura Loomer matter to this? Because everybody around Trump is exactly like Laura Loomer. And whenever Trump, there was a Wall Street Journal article that reported that last time when Trump bombed Iran in the very, very beginning of this war, I mean, within 8 hours of this war starting, when Donald Trump bombed Iran, one of the first people he called, and Wall Street Journal reported on this, was Laura Loomer. He called her. She didn't call him. He called her. And he wanted to brag about the Iran war, and then she started praising him, saying, you know, all of America is behind you right now. Everybody supports this war. Everybody's so thrilled. So imagine right now she's tweeting nonstop about how, you know, the United States really needs to just attack everything, wipe out Iran. He's getting fed that same thing. And keep in mind, Pete Hegseth is way, like, even worse when it comes to just, you know, truly a war hawk than Trump. I mean, there's always, you know, there's always levels to like just lunacy, and he thinks that this is a holy war. I mean, he's been saying there was an article by an
Oh,
independent
right. I want to work
journalist
with Hermes while we
in
do this.
Washington D.C. that was interviewing some people at the Pentagon, and they were saying that Pete Hegseth had unrestricted euphoria. I'm not kidding. They said he had unrestricted euphoria, and there were people at the Pentagon questioning how much blood has to be shed in order for this to count as Armageddon. I mean, this is totally deranged stuff. So if this guy, this evangelical Christian, Pete Hegseth, is thinking about how much blood has to be shed for this to incite and for this to instigate and be, you know, count as Armageddon, and he's the one who's in Trump's ear talking about, yes, let's take out the Amalek, let's take out the enemies of Israel. They want to set the whole region on fire. This is not, there's
You know what's wild is that you know, I was fooled into thinking that Hebrew was this ancient language when it's just like German, Slav, Aramaic, invented around World War II, you know, and I've recently learned that now please fact check me on this, but the Persians pre-Abrahamic faiths invented uh, some of these Abrahamic thinking ways as a means to religiously control the people in that territory. So, yeah, if that's true, that's wild. If not, you know, personally, those are faiths and strange things and beliefs from across the world that have very negatively affected Native peoples. So, you know, I know that it's such a core part of the other half of the world. There are, you know, other 2/3 of the world, but Native America's third of the world. That stuff is just very foreign and forced upon us. So it's just really sad to see these things affect the world so much. The amount of death that's happened because of all this stuff. It's really sad.
no rationale here. These people are dangerous. They're so dangerous. It doesn't matter how many kids are killed. It doesn't matter how many women are killed. It doesn't matter how many civilians are killed. They will do it because to them, they're Amalek. And I mean, this is what the religious leaders around Trump, not just these Israeli Zionists, these Israeli Jewish Zionists, but also these Christian evangelicals are thinking the same thing, and they're stating it publicly. Part of the reason, I mean, he said "Praise be to Allah" at the end of the Truth Social post. I mean, he's really trying to instigate religion throughout all of this. You know, so this is what's happening. I mean, really, the whole world right now, nothing would be more beneficial than just pulling out. This is the whole world's going to suffer because of this. The whole world's going to suffer because of this. So that's it for this video, guys. Let me go through some of these comments here. Also, if you want to support my channel, I'd really appreciate some super gifts and chats. I always respond to those first, so I'd appreciate it. Otherwise, if you haven't yet, and if you can join as a member, if you click the join button below next to the subscribe button, I'll be making a members-only video, and we can talk about this a little bit more if you want to discuss it as well, and I can answer some of the questions in those the members-only chat then too.
There you go. Oh, this stuff always gets me, but I think it's really important that we learn about this. So it's been happening for years now, and it's been happening for multiple presidencies throughout various administrations. This isn't a left or right issue. This is a native versus non-native issue.
The Biden administration says it's taking new steps to clamp down on child labor. That announcement came this week following the discovery of more than 100 teenagers working overnight shifts cleaning meat at processing plants in 8 states. The most underage workers were found at one beef factory in Grand Island, Nebraska. The Scripps News investigative team went there to dig deeper. Patrick Terpstra has more on what they found.
It's late at night in Grand Island, Nebraska, and employees are arriving at the city's sprawling meatpacking plant known as JBS Beef.
These are clearly workers arriving for the 11 o'clock start of the graveyard shift.
We were staked out in our vehicle trying to get a glimpse of who's showing up for work here. The U.S. Department of Labor did the same thing this past summer. They made a startling discovery. Among the adults on the job here, there were more than 24 underage workers, including this minor. One employee was as young as 13, all employed by Packer Sanitation Services, Inc., or PSSI. This PSSI training video online offers a glimpse of the kind of work that children were reportedly hired to do until the Department of Labor intervened. Federal records obtained by Scripps News describe teens suffering injuries from chemical burns, then going to school and falling asleep in class. One 17-year-old quit high school because they were working and tired from cleaning. This 65-year-old man we met works at the plant for JBS and agreed to speak to us about what he saw if we concealed his identity.
Hay un pasillo grande después de mi línea, en la última. Y pasaban y sí miraba unos que tenían menos edad.
Is the work dangerous?
Yo digo que sí, porque pues si para uno es peligroso, para uno que tiene edad, pues ahora para ellos más.
Federal court records reviewed by Scripps News show underage employees had been doing jobs in the meatpacking plant since at least 2019.
I have memories of classmates falling asleep in school because they were working overnight.
Audrey Lutz grew up in Grand Island. She was the longtime executive director of a local group known as the Multicultural Coalition, which helps new immigrants settle in the city. She made it a priority to try to help those underage workers identified by the Labor Department.
They're young, they're vulnerable, and they're afraid. My suspicion is that they are all undocumented.
How easy or not was it to get a job at PSSI without documents?
It is well known in our community that if you didn't have proper documentation, the cleaning crew would hire you.
PSSI told us hiring undocumented workers would be in complete violation of its policies. The company declined our request for an interview about the child labor investigation, and in an email to Scripps News, a spokeswoman wrote, "Our company has a zero-tolerance policy against employing anyone under the age of 18 and fully shares the Department of Labor's objective of ensuring full compliance at all locations." Our Scripps News investigation found 22 inspections of the Grand Island plant in the past decade. During that time, the Labor Department documented 16 violations against PSSI or JBS, ranging from unsafe wiring to improper machine guarding. But we found no citations for child labor.
Me deberían de ir cuando lavan. Pues ahí se hubieran dado cuenta ellos.
We are always looking for if there's instances of criminal activity.
Michael Lazzari led the investigation of PSSI for the Labor Department.
Why did it take the Department of Labor so long to detect child labor at PSSI and to act?
For an agency like ours, where we have 10 million employers, we can't be everywhere. How do these kids walk by a guard station in a facility so young, walking into plants every day? How come no one picked up the phone? I have questions about that. That to me is concerning.
The penalty for PSSI was $1.5 million. That doesn't seem like a lot.
It is the maximum that we could assess under law.
The anaskeleton culture.
The Labor Department this week announced new efforts to combat underage work, including asking Congress to boost the maximum civil penalty that can be levied against employers who break the law.
Reading the headline.
Patrick Terps for Scripps News, Grand Island, Nebraska.
All right, there is another interview with a New York Times reporter that goes into more depth about some of these kids' experiences and what's going on. And this was years ago. So it's a nightmare situation. I mean, your food, your cereal, your meats and stuff are being packed and
35 past the hour. Now to an update on a story that we've been following closely on this program. This morning, a House subcommittee is holding a hearing on how it says the actions of the Health and Human Services Department contributed to unaccompanied children being placed into unsafe situations with poorly vetted sponsors and being exploited for illegal child labor.
So when is somebody going to step into the U.S. and stop all the horrific things that's happening here, the same way the U.S. runs around the world policing everybody?
Children being at risk, but those warnings were mostly ignored. The Health and Human Services Department told the Times it, quote, vetted sponsors sufficiently, but couldn't control what happened to children after they're released. And White House officials said that while HHS and the Labor Department had passed along information about migrant child labor, the reports were not flagged as urgent and did not make clear the scope of the problem. With us now is Hannah Dreier, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the New York Times, who broke this story. Hannah, I can't thank you enough for being with us and
I think there's another reporter as well that's done something.
There's so much to talk to you about your story, but HHS and the Labor Department and the White House are all trying to say, look, I really didn't get this red flag big enough for my face. What were those red flags? And break down for what you found.
Look, we are really talking about a crisis in migrant child labor in this country. I found children in every state in the country who are working dangerous, illegal, exploitative jobs. These are jobs in factories and meat processing. And the Biden administration says, well, we had no idea about this. So my reporting has really been into what kind of warnings were missed. How is it possible that these children are everywhere in this country and the administration is saying, well, we didn't know?
So what is it that someone did know and that now they're saying we didn't get the red flag in our face enough? What were some of the things that they did know?
So they were pointed to evidence multiple times. They were told about clusters of children all across the country working overnight shifts, working in meat packing plants, working in car part factories. These are some of the most dangerous jobs. They were also given memos from lower level staffers explicitly saying, we are worried about trafficking.
My grandma was forced labored into an Indian industrial school.
Chicken processing.
This stuff really
and
hits
we're not
home.
talking about a low level staffer here. We're talking about Javier Becerra, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and the team run by Susan Rice, who is Biden's top advisor for immigration policies. These are warnings that have been coming in for 2 years.
You also met a 14-year-old from Guatemala named Antonio Diaz Mendez. Tell me and tell us a little bit about him.
So Antonio came to this country just after he turned 14. He was at a shelter for a month on the border. And at this shelter, they're supposed to make sure that they're releasing kids to people who will keep them safe, who will provide for them. And instead of that happening, he was released to a man who told him he had to pay off a debt.
Not a family.
A stranger, somebody he hadn't met, somebody from his village back in Guatemala. And he was basically put to work, paying off a debt to this man who the government had authorized to be his sponsor. And I found out about his case because another worker at the shelter actually had flagged it and had said, I'm really worried about what's happening here. I think this is trafficking. But nobody ever followed up.
You know what I keep thinking? These are the cases, and that you so diligently found, of kids that are forced to work because to pay back. But what about all of the thousands maybe of kids that are not being put to work in construction sites and in meat packing plants, but are being exploited and sexually abused? Is that a possibility? Because it seems like there
It's very
is
horrific,
no
but look up Bart
checking in.
Conrad Yeager.
The fact is, the government at this point does not know
abusively
what has happened to thousands and thousands of these children.
Migrant
Trafficking
kids.
can mean a lot of things. I've been focused on labor exploitation.
Not in the labor way,
because it
in
connects
the
so
worst case
directly to the
scenario.
products that all of us are using. I mean, Cheerios, Cheetos, Fruit of the Loom socks. These are places where we found migrant children were making products or packing products. But we've also heard about cases where it's other kinds of exploitation. And I mean, it's very disturbing.
Hannah, I can't thank you enough. Please stay at it, and please keep us informed. And this is such an important thing. And you know, the little kids, right? That little boy, 14-year-old Antonio.
Yeah.
Who has?
They're very alone.
They're very alone.
All right, there's another one that I've seen that, oh, this is the one.
Migrant children in the U.S. are working in some of the most dangerous jobs in the country. What's more, private auditors assigned to root out unlawful labor practices often overlook child labor. Laura Barone Lopez has more.
Now, could you imagine what
New
the
York Times
United
investigation found
Statesians would
auditors
say
failed to identify
if there was children
child
in
migrants
Iran
working at
being put through this? Like, can you imagine what, just for a second, what the United Statesians would say, left and right, if any other country in the world was doing this? But because it's always it's the Indians, you know, Spanish speaking, French, English, or whatever, you know, it's like people act like it's mythical creatures being abused. So it's pretty profound, you know. I really wish someone out there would reflect on what's happening to Native peoples in the Americas, the same way they would treat people around the world, you know, because a lot of these Guatemalan children are fleeing the Mayan genocide, which was it's the product of United Statesian and Israeli intelligence. There's well-documented connection of funds, arms, and training of the military dictatorship that just massacred Mayan people, and they're still fleeing all the terror, the settler terror that happened in you know, in Native America, and then they traffic and abuse these people once they think that they're somewhere safe. And it's just a whole really disgusting non-native settler project to terrorize and fund terrorism and take native lands.
production warehouses used by some of America's most recognizable brands, including Skittles, McDonald's, and Gerber. In addition, the most common job for migrant children coming to the U.S. is also one of the most hazardous: roofing and construction, despite federal law prohibiting anyone under 18 from doing so. Hannah Dreyer of the New York Times joins me now. Hannah, thanks so much for being here. You reviewed
I was just
private
thinking of the
audits
reporter, I think.
conducted at 20 production facilities for
Or the
well-known
interviewer.
brands. What did those audits reveal about the use of illegal child labor?
So at all of these production facilities, there were children working usually the night shift with fake IDs, doing jobs that are totally off limits for minors. These are industrial jobs, working assembly lines, working with caustic chemicals at slaughterhouses. And despite the fact that there were private auditors sent explicitly to try to find out if these plants were using child labor, these kids were missed every single time.
How did the companies respond to your investigation that these children were missed repeatedly?
You know, I've been covering migrant child labor for the past almost 2 years now, and we have uncovered children working these kinds of jobs in all 50 states. And every time I've gone to the companies and said, you know, McDonald's, why were children making the pork in your sandwiches? Or Gerber, why were children working overnight on your baby food products? They say, well, that can't possibly have happened because we have auditors in place who are supposed to be catching this stuff. And what we found is really the system is set up in a way that it's not going to find children. Children work at night and the auditors come in the morning. Children work with fake IDs. The auditors are checking paperwork, not actually speaking with children.
Jeez.
A 16-year-old was killed over the summer making chicken that goes in Chick-fil-A sandwiches. But he was working with an ID that said that he was in his 30s. So that's never going to get caught by the
Where's Chick-fil-A out here admitting to, protecting children, when they're literally profiting from the abuse of the original inhabitants of these lands? It's wild. It's just like, it's so obscene when you really take a look at what's going on in our lands and to our people across the board. It's truly horrific. And I really wish somebody would come help us.
by the system.
The private auditing industry makes billions to root out bad labor practices. So you hinted at why these children sometimes fall through the cracks. Children that are cleaning crews for slaughterhouses, or they're working in meatpacking plants across the country. Are there disincentives for auditors to actually say that there are child laborers?
That's exactly right. I talked to dozens of these auditors.
Sorry about that.
And they say that they essentially have this conflict of interest. The audits are paid for by the factories. And so auditors say when they come in and they find a lot of violations, they get in trouble with the factories and sometimes even with their own private auditing firms. I spoke to one auditor who was finding a lot of problems at factories, and his bosses sent him an email and they said, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they're not going to forget how you made them feel. And they're essentially saying, we want you to provide better customer service. And this auditor is trying to find actual problems and getting this pushback from inside his own organization.
Your reporting has also documented a surge in the number of migrant children coming to the U.S. Since 2021, nearly 400,000 migrant children have arrived alone in the United States. What countries are these children coming from, and what's caused this increase?
We've seen.
And also, I'll look it up while we're listening to this, but I'm pretty sure like 30 or like 50,000. It was tens of thousands of migrant children went missing during the the Biden-Kamala administration. And this is a native versus non-native issue, regardless of bipartisanship or politics. Bush got this started. Obama really got it going. Trump benefited and pushed it further. Then Kamala and Biden pushed it even further. And now we're back to the same nightmare situation. So it's really it's a native versus non-native issue. And I'll never forget, during the last election cycle, somebody asked Kamala about have you been to the border? Have you seen it? And she said, what about it? And I just took it as just such a cruel, non-native thing that, the suffering of the original inhabitants of these lands just means nothing. It's not even worth political points or whatever to them, And, the Trump administration is very clear how they feel about native people. So, I mean, but it's just so ridiculous how conflated this left and right stuff goes because they're both. if you really look at it from a Native perspective, both sides are terrible. They're invaders. All their policies are against Native people. It's insane. And they all benefit, and they all continually pass laws and do invasions to disrupt Native America.
Record numbers of children coming every single year since 2021. And like you say, they're coming from Central America for the most part, and they're coming really escaping poverty. These are places that were hit very hard by the pandemic. Food prices have soared, the jobs haven't come back. And what we're seeing again and again is parents are sending children, sometimes as young as 10, 11 years old, and they're expecting these kids to not only support themselves in the US, but also send money back. And so we have a situation now where there are nearly 500,000 kids in this country, and they're under huge pressure to make money. And they're ending up in these jobs that are sort of the only jobs they can get.
Many of these migrant children are working in roofing, and you spoke to more than 100 child roofers. What kind of tasks are they assigned? And can you give us a picture of the type of serious injuries that they might have when they're working in these jobs?
I went up on sites with some of these children, and the conditions are terrifying. They're up sometimes 30, 40 feet. They're working without harnesses or training, and sometimes they're falling. Roofing is one of the 3 most dangerous jobs in this country. It's something a child should never be doing. But these kids are working 12-hour days, and in a lot of cases, they're getting hurt. I spoke to the family of a 15-year-old who died in Alabama after he fell 40 feet. He was replacing the roof on a warehouse. A 16-year-old just this summer was killed in Florida when he fell from the roof of a house. Even when children aren't dying, I mean, they're getting terribly injured. And that goes for all of this work. They're getting their legs ripped off in slaughterhouses, their arms ripped open. And sometimes they're just working overnight every night and going to school, and they're sleep deprived. It's, terrible for their health.
The Times investigation into migrant child labor spanned a year or more, as you said. How has the Labor Department responded to all of this? And what do experts say needs to be done to root out unlawful child labor?
So this increase in child labor is coming at sort of the worst time. The Department of Labor is facing historically low staffing levels. Right now, it would take more than 100 years for inspectors to visit every workplace once. The Department of Labor has said in a response to our reporting that it is stepping this work up. It is trying to open more investigations, and it has opened some investigations in response to things that we found, like kids at certain slaughterhouses, at certain factories. But in the absence of a more robust labor department, really it's falling back on these private audits, which are failing to find kids. It's the kind of situation where if companies really wanted to go out and change how they're auditing, they probably could find these kids. They look young, they're not hard to find, but they have to want to find out what's going on.
Hannah Dreyer of the New York Times, thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, it's truly horrific what's happening to Native peoples right now. But there I am. It's so interesting watching like super United Statesian content. It's just I like to be aware of what non-natives talk about, think about. The content they make, which I think is really reflective of their policies and viewpoints of natives in these lands, and how they
Folks, the UFO files are getting out.
View this obscene, strange ownership of faraway lands and resources and people.
Absolutely out of control. I've covered on this channel so many UFO space technology experts that have either gone missing or been murdered in very, very suspicious circumstances. And apparently this is just the tip of the iceberg. The UFO community are digging deeper and deeper into some allegations that the government has really come in contact with extraterrestrial life. One of the craziest allegations that I've seen that I'm going to talk to you about in this video is that there are actually rumors, there are genuine people in mainstream media that are actually involved in the government, have been close to some of these programs, that are actually saying that extraterrestrial beings have been found and captured. There's been unidentified flying objects that have actually been shot down by the military. And I can't even believe this, but they're actually saying that apparently there are even programs to try and breed these extraterrestrial life forms that they have captured with humans. This is, I know I sound crazy, but this is actually what they're talking about. They're saying, right, just listen to this. Don't even take it from me. Don't even call me crazy. Let's just listen to this, okay? This is wild, okay?
A lot of native peoples all over the Americas all have very interesting, specific, profound stories about a lot of native people say star people. And yeah, I mean, I even went to a native conference about serious issues throughout our lands, covered everything. And one grandmother from Canada specifically spoke about how there was a troubling rise in abduction stories that were trafficking, because Native peoples experience a really horrible amount of trafficking because non-natives just target us for all sorts of reasons. I mean, our existence is a direct reminder of their foreignness to our lands, and all the horrible things that their relatives and ancestors have done. So whether it's just a direct reminder of them being settlers in our lands, or just their objectification, racism, etc. Yeah, it's pretty profound. It's these countries are based on harming native peoples. That's modern issues prove that's never changed.
So look, I don't even know where to start with this one. It's actually crazy. Okay, we're basically Representative Tim Burchett, this is somebody actually in the government, is basically claiming that there are actually alien breeding programs. I can't even believe one. Just listen.
Okay, I want to play you a soundbite. Former colleague of yours, Matt Gaetz, making some pretty shocking statements yesterday about aliens. Take a look.
I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid.
I'm sorry. I just can't unsee the Beavis and Butthead stuff. Like, geez. People are really funny with that stuff. I'll laugh if somebody really pins me down with something, with some character or whatever. But yeah, it was like a '90s person. Wow, yeah. I can't remember which one's which. I think he's the Beavis one.
Breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. Aliens that were living were in forced breeding programs with humans that had been abducted from war zones and from even the caravans of migrants.
All right. It sucks that we have to hear that from that guy, but there's a lot of serious people in the disclosure scene who've been, so he is not the first person by any means to openly start talking about this, but very serious people throughout the disclosure scene have been talking about how a lot of human trafficking happens during, by these dark organizations, Black Project government groups, for human testing, organs, etc., abuse rings, during natural disasters, like he said, wars and stuff like that. So, yeah, the warning of what's happening with some of these exotic technology vehicles being used to traffic people has already been out there. There was one special operations guy who was talking about coming across a UFO, for lack of better terms, an exotic technology ship being used to traffic people who were in shipping containers, and they were held at gunpoint by these people, and apparently survived because they were special operations and not just random people coming across this these evil settlers and their horrible trafficking ways.
That's someone in the government. He's really said that they're breeding migrants with aliens. What the fuck?
I mean, I don't have the tinfoil hat on just yet, Congressman, but I'm wondering, kind of how you react to that, because you are connected. You're on the UFO subcommittee. I mean, I'm just wondering what you make of that. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, I'm still a member of Congress, so I can't really comment too much on what Matt said. But I will say this.
Wait, seriously? Are you being serious, or is that tongue in cheek?
I'm being 100% serious. Okay. I've been 100% serious. I've been briefed by just about every alphabet agency there is. And I'll just tell you this. If they would release the things that I've seen, you would stay up. You'd be up at night worrying about or thinking about this stuff. We just need to disclose it all. I'm sick of it. Well, I was briefed. I'll just tell you this. I was briefed last week on an issue, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, and it would have set the earth on. This country would have come unglued, I think, if they would have heard all that I heard. They would demand answers, and we need to. But it's never going to get. Unfortunately, it just keeps getting covered up, and the people that know are dying or disappearing, as the case may be.
Wow.
And for the record, I'm not suicidal, and I don't take risks.
What the fuck? He's saying, I'm not suicidal. I can't even comment on this. My clearance is too high, but some of the things that I have seen, if the public knew them, they would be demanding results and answers. It's actually scary. Okay, it's actually scary that that's what they're saying. They say we need to protect this man. He ended that by saying, I am not suicidal. Noticing patterns could be hazardous to your health. I'm scared. They're saying most of the bribed, lying reptilians are in Congress. They're saying this interview was more chilling than the others with Birchett. He sounds freaked out by what he's been briefed on. He's been briefed on some shit. He's scared. He says, I am not suicidal. I'm saying this on Newsmax. Now, Vice President J.D. Vance recently spoke on the UFO files and his personal beliefs about aliens, and this was just as chilling. Look at this. J.D. Vance said they're demons. He said, I think they're demons. Look at this. It's insane.
You're going to release all the UFO files?
We're working on it. It's funny. When I came in, I was obsessed with the UFO files. And then you start getting really busy worrying about the economy and national security and things like that. But I've still got 3 more years as vice president. I will get to the bottom of the UFO files.
Okay. Have you peeked? Have you done a peek?
Have I what?
Have you done a peek? Have you
So I actually haven't. I have
full
not.
Independence Day.
I have not been able to spend enough time on this to really understand it. Yeah. But I am going to. Trust me, I'm obsessed with this. I've already had a couple of times where I'm like, all right, we're going to Area 51. We're going out to New Mexico. We're going to sort of get to the bottom of this. And then the timing of the trip just didn't work out. But trust me, anybody who's curious about this, I'm more curious than anybody. And I've got 3 years of the very, very tippy top of the classification. I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Okay, so you haven't been to Area 51 yet?
Not
Okay.
yet.
Some
Not
people
yet.
say they keep the UFOs in Ohio. You know, they might,
Yeah, Hangar 18, Hangar 18, right? I've heard that as well, but I don't know. I haven't looked into it yet.
Okay, all right. Well, we're waiting for it. We saw aliens.gov.
You know me.
We saw
You know me.
aliens.gov.
I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway, but that's a longer discussion.
Well, I can't let you go without a follow-up on that, because Barack Obama is on this podcast and he goes, "Yeah, aliens are real, but like, here's where they're not." And you know,
I did not.
And so Obama says,
I didn't
"Yes,
hear that
aliens."
one.
He gets asked point blank, "Are aliens real?" He said, "Oh yeah," and then he goes, "But they're not at Area 51." And
well, where are they, Barack?
Well, that's what he says. Right. There's a great question.
I need
Trump to
see
had to
this.
go save
I
him,
need
and
to
he
see
said
this
he's going to
podcast.
declassify.
Okay.
So you think they're demons?
Well, look, I think that celestial beings who fly around, who do weird things to people, I think that the desire to describe
It's just, oh wow, okay. I see that my mic is. When I swapped over to my headphones, my mic got funny. It's just so profound to hear that these I mean, yeah, if you didn't hear me before, settlers fly around and do weird things to people. So, I mean, with all the recent things, with the whole Epstein, all the different crazy settlers doing horrific things, they fly around and they do weird things to people. So, I would, in that very logical comparison, you could easily say that Settlers and Demons from J.D. Vance's talking points logically, comparing settlers to aliens.
describe everything celestial, everything is otherworldly, to describe it as aliens. I mean, every great world religion, including Christianity, the one that I believe in, has understood that there are weird things out there, and there are things that are very difficult to explain. And I naturally go, when I hear about sort of extra natural phenomenon, that's where I go to, is the Christian understanding that, you know, there's a lot of good out there, but there's also some evil out there. And I think that one of the devil's great tricks is to convince people he never existed.
So he thinks they're demons. He doesn't think they're aliens. He thinks they're literal demons from hell. This is the vice president, all right? The tinfoil hat. I need to get some tinfoil to put around my lovely Mariners hat here that apparently I'm not allowed to wear. It is insane, okay? So there's more, okay? Representative Anna Paulina Luna sent this viral letter to the Defense Department seeking answers for this. She sent a letter to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth requesting over 40 specific UAP videos. Basically said, the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets Task Force is continuing. Let's just mute that one. I put that on Do Not Disturb. Unidentified aerial phenomena, the continued lack of transparency surrounding these anomalies, the potential national security threat they pose is troubling. On September the 9th, 2025, the task force held a hearing focused on these concerns. Whistleblowers informed the task force that the AARO possesses additional video records of potential UAP sightings. To continue the investigation, the task force requests certain video files related to these sightings. The lack of disclosure regarding the very real threat posed by UAPs in and around the US restricted airspace is concerning. The task force found responses from the AARO when questioned about UAP sightings and provided data less than adequate. They didn't give enough info. The presence in and around these sensitive airspaces of US military installations proposes a threat of security to the armed forces. So they're saying, look, if it's the aliens, if it's the Iranians, we don't give a shit. We need to know what's going on with this. And it lists all these UAP sightings in videos that have been requested and weren't delivered. A 4 UAP formation in Iran, a Syrian UAP instant acceleration, a UAP USO formation, Wiley 2X Zinc, I don't know what that means, a cigar-shaped or fat spherical UAP in 2022, and the list goes on, all right? Erratic movement remix, spherical UAP in and out of the clouds, pulsing over the water, one in the clouds, a voodoo 4 times UAP, I don't even know where they're getting these names from. JD Vance is saying they're demons. This is saying they're naming some of these UAPs voodoos. What the hell are we talking about? This one's a warlock. They've seen him in Kabul. Dozens of these. Footage of UAP captured by a 5th generation aircraft. So the highest performing aircrafts in the US military are capturing these. And it never ends. There's dozens of them, 46 versions, 46 instances that have not been provided. Okay, people saying very important milestone. Just 10 years ago, this will be unthinkable. Thanks to all the collective effort in the UAP community, this is an official request. Exciting times. Says, oh, so they did shoot a UAP over Lake Huron in February the 12th, 2023. Insane how everyone forgot this incident after they said it was Chinese balloons. Caught my eye too. Don't forget, people, 3 objects after the balloon, NORAD.
Okay, just to reiterate on what I was saying earlier, because I think my mic was off. I have an associate's in background associate in heavy equipment technologies, been studying cybersecurity, and all the jobs in Michigan and around the Great Lakes are all very unique clearances, high level engineering for the government stuff. There's a lot of end of the line manufacturing that happens here. And so yeah, it's just they're mentioning places around the Great Lakes. A lot of some of the biggest aerospace contractors all got their start in Michigan. And yeah. It's just so interesting that this area has been mentioned a few times throughout this. And I just in case, because I think my mic was off when I was trying to explain this, I had friends in different sides of Michigan who both told me separately that their school, while they were growing up, told them to go to such and such school or such and such church to get into the underground infrastructure if there was like a serious disaster, etc. Whatever reason people need to do that. So there's a lot of that going on in this area. So yeah, it's just interesting to have it kind of confirmed in this almost random video about this.
Commander said we're not calling them balloons for a reason. They weren't balloons. They was UFOs, UAPs. All right, unidentified aerial phenomenon, spherical UAP, erratic movement. Me remix is a killer song name. It's insane. Okay, it would be funny if people weren't dying and going missing. Now.
Oh, and speaking of the hybrid stuff that they mentioned, I'm just repeating just because I think my mic might have been off. I went to a native conference that talked about serious issues, expanding all sorts of things. And one grandmother from Canada specifically talked about how there was a troubling rise in abduction stories, and not like trafficking, because unfortunately native people get trafficked a lot. I mean, these countries were founded on harming natives, so we still experience a lot of that. But I mean abduction stories, like star people, which is what native people often call, beings from not Earth or whatever. And yeah, and then they mention the migrants and the hybrid stuff like that with the government. It's just really wild. And I had also mentioned that JD Vance is not the first person to be talking about these dark government organizations trafficking people. There's been a bunch of people in the government disclosure scene who've came out to talk about how these aerospace contractors, dark government organizations, etc., have these off the books, basically militias who will use exotic technology vehicles to traffic people.
One major incident listed in the letter is the shootdown over Lake Huron, which was mentioned there, and this also coincided with another shootdown of a UFO in Yukon, Canada. Look at this. It's in the news.
Tonight, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing a U.S. fighter jet took out an unidentified object over the Yukon, scrambling both Canadian and U.S. aircraft.
The Air Force are shooting down UFOs over Canada. This is real. That's the Prime Minister of Canada opening up about this.
After coordinating with President Biden Saturday afternoon. Just one day after another unidentified object was shot down over Alaskan waters. With recovery efforts underway in the Arctic and more questions than answers about who owned it, why it was there, and what capabilities it may have.
Oh, speaking of UFO stuff, Alaska, and natives in the Great Lakes, I want to pull up There's some papers. I think it's UFOs. Plane. Things. Hallucinations. Oh, it's an academic paper. Titanic hours. Actually, we'll go to my link tree real quick. Yeah, plasmoids. Yeah, it's one of these. I'll just click on both of them. Extraterrestrial life in the thermosphere, plasmas, UAP, pre-life, fourth state of matter. Let's see, I'll move you guys over here so I can read this. They talk about the Great Lakes in some of these. One of these papers talks about a freaking golden orb being found off the coast of Alaska. So I think a lot of these this is a whole interesting rabbit hole because in my people's prophecy specifically, we have something called the Seven Fires prophecy, and my last name and my grandma's last name specifically come from those prophecies, the Wabanimki and the Ginawapakisi, and and through learning about all of this stuff, I came across these papers and learning about plasmoids, and one of the Navy scientists studying these things. Let's see if I can find it. I'm trying to think how it's worded. Anyway, there's a Navy scientist who is studying these plasmoids with hyperspectral cameras and proposed that they might be next dimensional, extra dimensional beings. And the way I've kind of explained it, and he explains it, is that you see in 2D always, even though you have these concepts of 3D, but you use time, which is like our fourth dimension in the the 3D space, and then 4D is the time. You use time in increments to view and perceive things as non 3D, right? You like look around it. And so what this Navy scientist kind of explains is that like they may be able to look around time the same way we look around things, and and in that thinking process, from the Seven Fires prophecy perspective, uh, it's not too far-fetched when trying to connect all this in a scientific way that these plasmoids, if they are able to look around time, certain ones or beings or whatever, um, that they warned us to leave the East Coast because our prophecies warned us, and people have dated about 300 years before Europeans came to the Americas, that these beings warned us that specifically white people would come here, and some would be friends, some would be enemies, um, etc., and predicted everything from the invasions, the mass deaths, to the boarding schools abusing our elders and families and stuff, um, and up to today with climate issues. So it's really profound. It's I'll have to find. There's quite a few papers around this. I don't think these two are the only real ones that I'm really trying to focus on here, but they really cite evidence for how these beings could cause mass hallucinations, because the government's really studying it, because you can't have pilots hallucinating. You know, you got to know what the heck is going on. These plasmoids have caused nightmares and stuff like that in people, well, all sorts of phenomenon, and we can prove that with the right pulsed electromagnetics and the right amount of frequency and density within a certain square area of electromagnetic energy, that we can induce hallucinations in the lab. These papers go over that, specifically citing how these plasmoids may be affecting people's minds and stuff. But they mention in one of these a golden orb. I'll have to go back to that. Off the coast of Alaska. So it's been really, this is stuff all came out like a year or two ago. Maybe it's on this one. Yeah, but these papers are in my link tree, so they're I've gone over both of them for quite a while, over and over here, over the last couple of years, and I think there's like one other one that I'm missing that has the talks about an ancient civilization potentially coming out of the Great Lakes. Yeah, I'll look it up while we watch this.
Have had.
We don't have any information that would confirm a stated purpose for this object.
President Biden ordered U.S. fighter jets to take it out with a missile just hours after learning about it. But already some key differences emerging with the Chinese balloon blasted out of the sky a week ago. First, in size.
It was much, much smaller than the spy balloon that we took down last Saturday.
Closer to a small car versus the Chinese spy balloon, which was 200 feet tall with a satellite on the bottom as large as a regional jet. The unmanned object Friday was also taken down much faster, about 24 hours after first being detected, compared to the 8-day journey the balloon took before being hit over the Atlantic. And then there's the elevation.
The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight.
Much lower than the Chinese balloon, parts of which are still being recovered off the coast of South Carolina.
We have located a significant amount of debris so far that will prove helpful to our further understanding of this balloon and its surveillance capabilities.
The retrieval efforts in Alaska complicated by treacherous conditions, with searches being done through ice and snow. Part of the mystery, if it's not another balloon, what could it be and from where?
I think it's more likely to be harmless than a active Chinese intelligence collection effort.
Raising.
So look, we don't know. We don't know what it is, all right? It's insane. It's actually insane. People say, I don't believe for a minute they don't know what's happening. They just aren't telling the public. Whatever it was or whoever sent it, it's probably just testing our response time. It is scary, okay? TMZ would investigate this incident deeply as well, okay? Oh, sorry, TWZ, not TMZ. We flipped it on them, okay? This says, secret memo raises more questions about UFO shoot-downs over Alaska, Canada. A memo to Justin Trudeau provided insights and prompts additional questions about the mysterious aerial engagements last February, okay? Let's see, this is a lot. This is a long one. Let's lock in. Let's lock the F in, okay? It says, following the shoot down of 3 unidentified objects in 3 days over Alaska, the Yukon, and Lake Huron in February, and the downing of a Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina a week earlier, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had a secret memo laying out how the Canadian government was responding to the Yukon incident. It stated the full exploitation of whatever the U.S. Air Force shot down over the waters of Alaska had not yet been completed. They don't want to know what it is. Reports said a few days later, the U.S. called off a search for a wreckage of the downed object. Exactly what type of intelligence exploration this is unclear. Yeah, no, don't worry about it. We called off the search. We didn't find anything. Don't worry about it. Don't even ask about this again. Don't ever ask about this ever again. And don't request these footages either. That's what they're saying. Okay, the memorandum for the Prime Minister, transmitted on Valentine's Day, funnily enough, was obtained by the Canadian TV news outlet through Freedom of Information request. It basically said they verified that the North American Aerospace Defense Command numbered unknown objects sequentially to track every detected object not immediately identified. Upon cross-examination, most objects found to be innocuous and don't meet the higher threshold for higher reporting engagement. Don't worry about it, doesn't matter. But the memo identified it as UAP-23. It was the 23rd unidentified radar track by NORAD over North America at that point that year that was classified as UAP, and it did rise to a high level of concern given that it was shot down. It was bad enough, it was serious enough that they shot it down. And this is actually the document explaining some of this stuff. They have no idea Object 23's function, method, or propulsion or affiliation with a nation state is unverified. They have no idea where it came from, and they have no idea what technology it was using. That is absolutely insane. It was shot down by a US Air Force F-22 Raptor. The remains were unverified, unknown whether it posed an armed threat or has intelligence collection capabilities. They don't know anything. Well, I'll tell you what, they definitely don't want you to know anything. That is what's going on. So the Canadian Air Force were doing a search effort to find it, and they said, it was unlikely we're going to find it. Don't worry about it. Just forget this ever happened. Okay? They're saying that they were concerned indigenous hunters might accidentally find the UFO object during their caribou hunt, and they've basically scrambled fighter jets to try and find this thing. It's actually insane. Okay, it's actually very, very insane. So there's been a lot of questions about what it is. Could it have collected intelligence for different countries? During the February 11th news conference, the Canadian Defense Minister said the unknown object was a small cylindrical object smaller than the Chinese spy balloon that was flying at 40,000 feet when it was shot down. So there was an official brief on the matter where they basically said that there was an operation between the Canadian fighter jets and the US fighter jets. And they basically said the team was instructed, whoever had the first best shot, take it out. That's what they said. It also mentioned another UAP shoot down by an F-22 over the water in the northeastern corner of Alaska. That was described as UAP-20. There's a whole bunch of them, all right? The full exploitation of UAP-20, which was engaged, has also not yet been completed. Just don't worry about it. Apparently, that object broke into pieces once it hit the frozen sea ice off of Prudhoe Bay, just off of Alaska. And they're saying, again, the US called off the search, all right? They're wondering what it means about full exploitation. They're saying that it could be foreign material exploitation. They basically say that they have to pick up all of these evidence of these things. It's critical to major adversary intelligence revelation. So they basically have to make sure this ain't the Russians or the Chinese doing some crazy stuff over our waters. It is actually insane. Okay. And there's been a whole bunch of these F-35 fighter jets that are capturing full videos of these things. They're looking at the radio frequencies in their sensor systems, and they don't want to release the videos of this. They have footage of all of the UAP sightings. Absolutely just... It has been recorded by the fighter jets. They've got it. They just don't want you to see it. Okay. It's crazy. They've been trying to say, we tried to capture that stuff in Alaska. It was on top of sea ice. It was hard to find. They said the object was traveling at 40,000 feet, the size of a small car, and it was shot down because at that altitude, it was perceived as a threat. They described that number 20 object as cylindrical and silverish gray. That sounds like your classic UFO. They're saying, all I can say is it wasn't flying with any sort of propulsion. So if it was balloon-like, well, we just don't have enough at this point. And these details are completely different from what they were told about the Chinese spy balloon. They basically, described it completely different. That balloon was able to maneuver. It was the size of a small airliner, and it traveled between 60 and 70,000 feet. So basically, a lot of speculation has been made about what these could have been. All these different UAPs, number 21 and number 22. They don't want to talk about that. And it says the object shot down over Lake Huron might have seemed to be a relatively small balloon based on the radio communications, but basically no one wants to give any information. The NORAD said that they would not be addressing the memo. I would caution that one internal document from February the 15th. It might not have the most accurate information about events during those periods. So they're saying, ignore the document that had some information. It doesn't have accurate information, and we won't be giving you any more information whatsoever. That is scary, honestly. That is scary. And they've made a whole bunch of requests to Congress for more information about these shoot downs. They're not providing any of it. They don't want you to see any of it, okay? Everybody's confused. Now, what's really interesting, there actually is some audio recordings of the pilots as they intercepted that object over Lake Huron, and we can hear actually some of what they said.
You can see something, I can't tell if it's metallic or what, and there's, I can see like lines coming down below, but I can't see anything below it. One looking outside is kind of like a blackish, I'm going to call it like a container. I can't really tell though what the shape is. It's just so slow and so small and you can't see it until you're so close. I'd honestly be worried about hitting it before you know it was there. almost like a octagonal shape. I'm going to call it a balloon. You can definitely see strings hanging down below, but I don't see anything below it. It's pretty small. I don't know, size of like a four-wheeler or something.
So there's an octagonal object flying in the sky that's grey. It's got string hanging down it, like it looks like a balloon, but it's not carrying anything. And it's the size of a UAV. Sorry, it's the size of an ATV. I don't even know how the F-16 pilots can even tell the size of it by eyeball, but hey, that's just what it is. Now, there's unconfirmed footage of a Lake Huron object that's been circulating online. This video was posted just a day after the UFO was shot down, and some people think this might actually be some amateur footage of the UFO in the sky. Look at this. You know, I would love for a camera sighting, for a UFO sighting to take place while somebody's maybe filming like a big budget movie with like a quality camera. That would be great. But the way this thing's moving is very bizarre. It's saying it's the size of an ATV. It's moving very erratically. The way it's moving around, that's not moving like your average aircraft. Honestly, I don't think that's moving like a balloon either, but that's just my opinion. But can you see that? Just that little dot there. The way it's moving around so erratically, it's almost moving like a bird in flight, just whizzing around left to right. So in the video, you can actually see the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, Illinois. Now, this is interesting because it's just a bit unusual that this would take place
Michigan,
right in front of a planetarium. Look at that. You see that? The Adler Planetarium in Chicago, a journey among the stars. You really mean to tell me that you're seeing the UFOs above this thing? This thing looks like a UFO. It's just all very suspicious. It's all very suspect, okay? I'm quite confused. And this is in Chicago. I don't know if any of the O-Block members ever made their way out to the planetarium to check that out. But I feel like the aliens would probably know a little bit better than to be flying unidentified over O-Block. But anyway, I feel like this is super spooky. All right, I found it really interesting covering these UFOs.
Super spooky. Oh, I'll leave a like. That was good content. It was really profound here in the, talking about migrants and the trafficking stuff, and then apparently there's government people talking about hybrid programs with the migrants. That's what I was wondering about with the Epstein stuff and the finding about the genetic experiments in New Mexico. It's like a very native-centered area. All right, let's split it up with some real more kind of academic, serious content.
So, friends, the month of March started with Donald Trump escalating his unconstitutional war against Iran, endangering the lives of our troops. And the month of March ended with Donald Trump escalating his unconstitutional war against Iran, endangering the lives of our troops.
I have my
Friends,
agents,
something's got to give,
more set up here.
and it shouldn't be America's standing in the world, and it sure as hell shouldn't be the lives of the men and women of the armed forces.
Processing and kind of dissecting the native perspective
matters.
For
Friends,
all
here's
these
a short
issues.
recap of the
I'm
legal
still here,
stories for the month that
water.
was
I'll be right back. Enjoy.
March 2026. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, we can never forget, we must never forget the searing injustice of Donald Trump's pardons of the January 6th rioters, the insurrectionists, the people who attacked and assaulted police officers. But then, adding insult to injury, actually adding another layer of injustice, Donald Trump's dirty DOJ leadership also retaliated against the federal prosecutors who held the insurrectionists accountable for their crimes. The federal prosecutors who, in a very real and direct sense, protected American democracy. So friends, as you well know by now, Donald Trump unlawfully attacked Iran, and he has entered America into an unconstitutional, quote, war. His word. And Donald Trump has already sent multiple U.S. military members to their death. So friends, if you look really closely at Pam Bondi's Department of Justice, you can almost see it circling the drain. I just saw something that I never saw in my 30 years as a Fed. Yesterday, Pam Bondi's DOJ filed a notice with the Court of Appeals, saying, we want to withdraw. We want to abandon the 4 appeals that we filed in 4 cases where Donald Trump issued executive orders against 4 law firms trying to punish them, in a very real sense, trying to extort them, saying, among other things, their lawyers can't even set foot in federal courthouses. I mean, so laughably and transparently lawless and unconstitutional, but Donald Trump wanted to punish those law firms because apparently they represented clients or causes that displeased dear leaders, so he tried to punish them. And DOJ went down in flames in all 4 cases. And then DOJ yesterday did something that actually made some sense. They said, we want to abandon the appeals. They cried uncle, they threw in the towel, they gave up. That's a tacit acknowledgement that they lost badly and they were likely to lose in the Court of Appeals as well. That's what they did yesterday. Then today, they just said, we take it all back. We want our towel back. We actually don't want to withdraw or abandon those appeals. Friends, this is the DOJ in disarray. So friends, thus far, Donald Trump has sent 6 military members, 6 of America's sons and daughters to their death in what is, by all rational accounts, an unlawful and unconstitutional war. And just so there's no mistake about the fact that we are in a war, Pete Hegseth just said at a press conference, quote, the terms of this war will be set by us, close quote. Well, on the heels of that debacle, it looks like the Department of Justice just bucked Donald Trump again. Remember when Donald Trump wanted his DOJ to prosecute Joe Biden for using an auto pen? Remember this headline? Trump orders a probe into the Biden administration and its alleged auto pen use. Well, friends, brand new development, just reported by the New York Times. Headline, Justice Department, under pressure from Trump, fails to build auto pen case against Biden. Prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington were unable to build a case, underscoring the department's, DOJ's, increasing inability to follow through on the president's desire to indict his rivals. You know, friends, it sure looks like Donald Trump's DOJ leadership, Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Jeanine Pirro, that leadership is crumbling. And it's looking more and more like Donald Trump's entire presidency is imploding. So friends, you may not know this, but to be an attorney at the Department of Justice, you need to have a license to practice law issued by one of the 50 states or the District of Columbia. Now, against that backdrop, listen to this. Pam Bondi is trying to get rid of all ethical guardrails at the Department of Justice. First, she fired the head DOJ ethics attorney. Then, she fired the head of the Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR, That's the organization, the internal DOJ organization that investigates allegations of misconduct by DOJ attorneys. And now Pam Bondi is trying to violate states' rights by prohibiting state bar ethics offices from investigating allegations of attorney misconduct for attorneys who hold a license to practice law from a particular state. Here is what a Democracy Docket headline screams. DOJ attempts to evade state ethics oversight of its attorneys. But friends, here's the good news, and here's the call to action. There is an opportunity for we the people to weigh in, make our voices heard, and oppose this latest effort by Bondi to destroy the ethical guardrails at the Department of Justice. And we will make our voices heard. So friends, I hope you're sitting down. Pam Bondi continues to tear down DOJ's ethical guardrails. First, she fired DOJ's top ethics advisor and didn't replace him, didn't fill the position. Then, she fired the head of the Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR. That's the office responsible for investigating allegations of misconduct by DOJ lawyers, and she didn't replace him. She didn't fill the position. So we now have two rudderless ethical ships adrift at the Department of Justice. But she's not done. Now Pam Bondi is trying to block state bar ethics organizations from investigating allegations of misconduct by DOJ attorneys. So friends, some of Donald Trump's flunky DOJ lawyers just filed a new brief in court, and once again, it opens sounding a lot like an unhinged 2 a.m. Trump social media post. This new brief was filed in an appeal of a case that Trump lost, but correction, 4 cases Trump lost, involving those absurd executive orders that he issued, seeking to punish law firms that represented clients or causes that displeased dear leader. Now, you may recall just a few days ago, DOJ filed notice with the court that they were abandoning these appeals. They were withdrawing these 4 appeals. That's a sure sign that they knew they couldn't win. But then, the next day, they changed their mind. Or, more likely, somebody changed their mind for them, and they ended up filing this nearly 100-page piece of really poor lawyering. You know, friends, Pam Bondi just can't stop, won't stop, re-victimizing the Epstein survivors. In fact, she just unlawfully, in violation of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, unlawfully revealed the names of 21 survivors. Pam Bondi should be impeached, and then Pam Bondi should be held accountable for these violations of federal law.
Donald Trump decided that he wanted his big old face hanging off the side of the Department of Justice on these big, ugly banners, and there they are, kind of limply hanging off of the Department of Justice. But, I mean, what was your first thought when you heard that we now have Trump's face adorning the Department of Justice?
It was another way for President Trump to let the world know that he is in charge of the Justice Department. His actions from day one have certainly telegraphed that. But this, I think, is probably the most direct statement to that effect.
So, friends, as Donald Trump endangers us around the globe with his unconstitutional war on Iran, FBI Director Kash Patel endangers us at home, firing some of the very FBI agents who were working on protecting us against terrorist threats on U.S. soil.
Now we've got precedent, albeit only controlling precedent in the D.C. circuit. So, that is perhaps not the best tactical move for the administration.
I mean, look, the administration has not been able to prevail on its retribution agenda really at all. It comes out a lot of bark. They haven't been able to return indictments on people. They haven't been able to secure convictions. In this case, they weren't able to prevail on their executive orders when in civil court when the law firms pushed. And one of the main areas where the administration has been losing so much is First Amendment.
So, friends, here comes one heck of an Epstein Files update. We know that state law enforcement authorities in New Mexico are now investigating Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch in the state of New Mexico. That is the scene of allegations of horrific crimes by Epstein, Maxwell, and others. And it's good that the New Mexico law enforcement authorities are investigating. Indeed, virtually as we speak, they are searching that property. But the curiosity is, why wasn't the Zorro Ranch searched by law enforcement authorities when they searched his home in New York, when they searched his home in Florida, when they searched his home on his infamous island? Well, we now know the answer to that question. Why didn't they search the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico? And what we just learned about why there was no search, I think qualifies as a blockbuster development in the ongoing horrific saga of the Epstein Files. So, friends, sometimes it seems like accountability can take forever, and then it comes all at once. Remember all those Trump lawyers who got disbarred during Trump's first presidential rodeo? Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Kenneth Chesebro, and others? Well, there are some other lawyers who didn't pay attention to that cautionary tale, and one of them is this guy, Ed Stop the Steal Martin. So, friends, the chief judge of Federal District Court in Washington, D.C., just blew out of the water Donald Trump's latest attempt to vindictively prosecute one of his perceived enemies, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. That is the rule of law rising up to defeat a lawless president and his hack U.S. attorney.
We should not forget the questions that were asked of her yesterday that she doesn't want to answer, particularly about the misuse and abuse of taxpayer dollars with her staffer, Corey Lewandowski, greenlighting who gets what no-bid contract and potentially profiting from it on the other side. We can't forget that stuff has happened. Even if she's removed, even if she disappears from public light, it is worthwhile for Democrats, when they take back power, to go follow the money and hold people accountable. And that's why the Watchdog report exists.
You're singing my tune, Kurt, because my thing is I am keeping track of all of the crimes. And it's another very long list. Yeah. The crimes and the criminals who are perpetrating them, because my sworn mission, as long as I'm drawing breath, is accountability.
Well, friends, Kristi Noem has just been referred to the Department of Justice for a criminal investigation for allegations that she lied to Congress in her recent testimony. Now, friends, I'm not prepared to say that hell just froze over, but it does seem to be getting a little chilly down there, because a Republican-controlled congressional committee just subpoenaed Pam Bondi to testify before Congress about, quote, mismanagement of DOJ's release or failure to release the Epstein Files.
Well, the thing is, they don't mind turning on their own, as long as the charade and everyone's focus can be redirected to someone.
Wow. So, friends, a federal judge just delivered a huge win for the rule of law, for the American people, and, not hyperbole, for global security, and a huge loss for Donald Trump and one of his flunkies, Kari Lake.
What is your take as a military law expert and retired Army JAG Lieutenant Colonel when you hear a commander-in-chief say, you know what, we may just bomb another country for fun?
Yeah. Again, it's hard to read, what is he intending this to mean? Is he just being, hyper-masculine and bravado and trying to frighten Iran into submission and demonstrating how powerful the U.S. military is? We can do it with impunity and we'll just do it for fun. Poor choice of words. Because, well, two reasons. The first simple reason is it oversimplifies the horror of combat, right? It diminishes the meaningfulness that goes along with taking the life of someone else, even in a wartime context, right? It diminishes the seriousness of what we're talking about. The second reason is a legal reason. That legal reason is you have to, under the laws of war, have a military necessity when you attack a target.
So, friends, in case you thought the Epstein Files couldn't get any worse, or you thought that Pam Bondi's cover-up of the Epstein files. Couldn't get any worse? Hold on tight, because here comes some new revelations about an investigation that seemed to disappear right around the time of the beginning of Trump's first term. An investigation of, quote, Jeffrey Epstein and 14 other people for drug trafficking, prostitution, and money laundering. Close quote. So, friends, today we lost an American hero. Robert S. Mueller III, or Bob, as we called him, when he was chief of the homicide section at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, and we were his homicide team. He was our boss. Now, I've said this publicly many times over the years. Bob Mueller was the single best leader and supervisor I ever had the honor to work for. Yeah, today we lost a lion of justice, a warrior for accountability, and an American hero. What can be done about the lawlessness of a Pam Bondi and a Todd Blanche? So what do you see happening to this criminal referral? And what, if anything, can be done about it, depending on what you think Pam Bondi might do with it?
Well, I'll tell you this. I don't even know all the facts of it, but I can tell you for sure that this referral will go nowhere, and it will go nowhere because this administration will squash it.
All right, so let's talk. This is a softball question for anybody running for office. Why is it that you now want to represent the people of Pennsylvania's 7th?
I'm running for Congress to stop Donald Trump. And, as you mentioned, most of my life has been in the service of the country. I'm a patriotic person. I love my country. Served almost since graduating from law school. And
it's always just so wild to be like, it's small things, but as a native person, it's always like hearing non-natives say my country and this and that, my land, this and that. It's like, you guys have no idea what it's like to say my land and know that your genetics are tied here to beyond history.
I don't want to see a country ruined, a country that so many have fought and died for, ruined by this administration and this president.
So, friends, you want to hear a really inconvenient development for Pam Bondi? Law enforcement officials in the UK want the unredacted Epstein files so they can hold wrongdoers accountable. In fact, London's top cop, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley, said the following, quote, of course, there's a big body of that evidence in the United States in all those files, the Epstein files, and at some stage, we're going to need the unredacted evidence, Sir Rowley said, quote, we need the original copy, and where did it come from? And that's going to be necessary if we get to the stage of court cases, close quote. Now, we already know that Pam Bondi won't disclose the full unredacted Epstein files to the American people in violation of federal law, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. So the question becomes, will she disclose the unredacted Epstein files to law enforcement authorities in other countries so they can pursue justice? So, friends, regarding the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, it looks like the state of Minnesota will not sit idly by and let Donald Trump's dirty DOJ leadership obstruct justice by refusing to turn over the evidence to Minnesota state prosecutors.
It's truly a tragedy what happened to those two people. And I don't mean to add a but after that, but like a lot of Native people, including children, are being trafficked and abused. Your cereal and breakfast meats are made and packed by Spanish-speaking Native children. And, this country's white privilege is just really shows its face during events like this. What happened to them was a tragedy, absolutely. And we're facing serious fascism and all around civil unrest and turmoil. However, where was this outrage for anything that happens to Native peoples? It's really, I'm just always in shock about how backwards some of the things people, non-natives, can say and act like while completely turning away from the things that they do here to Native people still. Ethnic natives, Spanish, French, English, and indigenous speaking. because I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of the migrants being labor trafficked in by the United Statesians, there's quite a large portion of them who only speak their indigenous language, and they need specialized translators, and they are especially taken advantage of through labor trafficking by these non-native folks here. All your food, all your produce, everything you eat has its roots in native trauma, abuse, and exploitation.
That's right. Minnesota just sued Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice. Well, friends, Trump and his DOJ's abuse of the American taxpayers continues unabated. Are you ready to be outraged again? Well, I can't say it any better than my friend and now independent journalist, Scott McFarland, said it. What a racket, says a top Democrat. Michael Flynn becomes the latest MAGA ally to get taxpayer-funded payout.
Can you start by telling everybody a little bit about Represent Us, the great initiatives that you're involved in, and then we're going to take on some of the issues of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So Represent Us works on accountability, accountability of government to the people, and accountability for corruption and abuse of power. That's what it boils down to. It's a fundamental democratic principle.
Well, friends, the Epstein survivors just filed a class action lawsuit against Donald Trump's Department of Justice for re-victimizing them by unlawfully publishing the names and identities of more than 100 victims, outing them, and causing them to suffer. Quoting the complaint, survivors now face renewed trauma. Strangers call them, email them, threaten their physical safety, and accuse them of conspiring with Epstein when they are, in reality, Epstein's victims.
So let me start with the softball question, Ed. Why is it that you are running for Congress? Why do you want to represent the people of Ohio's 7th?
Sure. Well, you talked about some of my resume, and one of the things that I did right after I got out of law school, I was hired by the Justice Department as a special agent with the FBI. I worked in Chicago, actually, on organized crime and political corruption cases. I worked on an organized crime task force. For anybody that's listening to this that knows the Chicago area, I worked on cases in Cicero, Illinois, which is the most corrupt part of the Chicago area, which is quite a competition sometimes. And what you had there was you had a criminal organization, being the Chicago Mafia, and they had completely captured...
This is... As a native person, I am just so giddy to tell y'all that Chicago means the place of skunks. And all you non-natives literally say the place of skunks. It's like an insult. It's a globally known city and a giant fucking joke. Because as far as I know, what I learned was one of the original Wall Streets was there, and there was also a giant wall specifically. That's why they called it that, to keep the native peoples out of that area. Because we've the easiest way I can even show it is the Palestine issue, and native people have been the Palestinians of these lands for way longer than anyone wants to really admit, and so we get the last laugh that all these non-natives are running around basically saying we're a bunch of stinky colonizer settlers and we named our entire city off of a joke and an insult.
Local government. So every single aspect of city government there was basically a criminal conspiracy. And I kind of thought that FBI experience was in my past. But what I have seen happen in the last year or so, I feel like I'm back in Cicero, Illinois again, because almost everything that this administration does has basically almost criminal intent behind it, quite honestly.
So friends, I sure hope you got to participate in a No Kings rally near you. It was so energizing, reinforcing the reality that millions of Americans are standing against the aspiring dictator, the orange autocrat, the wannabe king.
Orange autocrat.
Friends, I was really fortunate. I had the privilege of addressing the crowd right before the march into D.C. And when I looked out over that sea of people, I was inspired, I was energized, and I was humbled.
Does a tour like this
feel any different to you or your fellow members of the E Street Band? Is there a different urgency that will come to the performances, or does it feel like you've been through so many tours that it's all pretty much the same?
Well, I think it's slightly different just because of everything that's going on in the country at the moment. And the idea of the tour is to shine a light on that and let people know that things could be better. Things could be better if there weren't so much things being screwed up.
So friends, take a look at this headline from the New York Times editorial board. The people Trump pardoned are on a crime spree, proving, once again, Donald Trump is a danger to the community. Let's talk about that, because justice matters.
I just want to say too that it's not just him. You know, Trump is the clown mask being waved in everyone's faces that everyone can point a finger at, when it's all of the settlers and non-natives, and unfortunately probably some Custer Scout ass natives. There's the ideology behind it. It's not just one guy, you know. It's like I said, he's just a mask that gets waved in front of everyone, that everyone can be distracted at and point their fingers at, and oh, you know, haha, this and that orange joke, you know. But you know, there's very serious, dangerous people that are of this ideology. These settlers are dangerous. Yeah. Oh, let's see. Let's see. Oh, that's right. I'm gonna stream a little coding stuff here. This guy is really good with words. You know, I think that's the thing I'll watch here while I work on my my Hermes installation on my Raspberry Pi. I'm just kind of trying to figure out what I want to work with, you know, as there's so much going on. Yeah, good enough.
I apologize for the profanity, especially to my mother. On Easter Sunday, I wouldn't normally talk like that, or in public, on air, talk like that at all. But that did not stop the President of the United States of America from issuing that message in print above his name in the White House rubric. There it is there on the screen, if you find it difficult to believe me. Who was it that allowed Donald Trump to send that message? Who was it that didn't feel wise enough or strong enough to try to stop him? Who was it that felt that on Easter Sunday, issuing a call for all praise to Allah might be offensive to some? Who was it in the White House who thought that it could be lawful, even in the wilder shores of the American injustice system, to threaten literal war crimes, literally in writing, above your own name? Who was it that thought that Donald Trump continues to be fit and proper to discharge his duties as the man in charge of the nuclear football, which could bring life on Earth finally to an end? It doesn't get much more serious than that, and we'll come back both in my monologue and in the excellent interview, I promise you, with Larry Johnson, formerly of the State Department, formerly of the CIA, if you can ever be formerly part of the CIA. Larry knows what's what, and you are going to benefit from it in just a few minutes' time. But let me go to the events of last night. Good taste prevents me, or at least prevented my editor, from showing the photograph which has emerged of the blackened, burned skull of an American airman. That's the American airman they claimed that they rescued. This was found amongst all the wreckage on the plane near Isfahan, that they said was the wreckage of aircraft that they themselves had blown up because it had got stuck in the sand. Those are Black Hawks down. Those are C-120 transport aircraft, though why you would fly in a huge transport aircraft to rescue a lone pilot is beyond me, but it won't be beyond Larry Johnson, that I can assure you. This has all the hallmarks of the ill-fated disaster, electoral as well as human, that afflicted President Jimmy Carter in the dog days of his ill-fated presidency, when he mounted a rescue attempt in the Iranian desert, something similar. He didn't know that the Iranians were working with the incoming president, as it turned out, President Ronald Reagan, for an October surprise. They were unaware of the fact that Ronald Reagan would be even worse than Jimmy Carter. As many are now saying, they were unaware that Donald Trump's cognitive decline doesn't just match the cognitive decline of his immediate predecessor. And bear in mind, in the 21st century, we've also had the inches from imbecility George W. Bush. George W. Bush, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump, all in the first quarter of the 21st century, surely tells us something about the decline of the United States of America. Nobody could quite have guessed that Easter Sunday would have been marked, would have been scarred by the President of the United States, who's always telling us what a holy Joe he is, but only these days. He used to boast of being an atheist. He has no known church affiliation. Watching him and Melania standing in an empty church the other day, well, it just looked jarringly off. But he has persuaded the evangelicals to the extent that support for Donald Trump's policy towards Israel is now stronger amongst American evangelical Christians than it is amongst American Jews. The Jews have far more sense. They can see what the American evangelicals cannot, that Donald Trump is destroying his presidency. He's destroying his MAGA movement. He's destroying everything he ever said he stood for about making America great again, about putting America first. He's ushering in a new era of Democratic Party rule. Yes, that's right, unfortunately. He has achieved the most amazing resurrection of them all, at least in the last 2,000 years. The resurrection of Kamala Harris, who now looks and sounds perfectly sane compared to the man who defenestrated her just over a year ago. Donald Trump will not resurrect the fortunes of the Republican Party. They are as dead as the dodo, which existed sometime after the Stone Age, President Trump. The Stone Age in which Iran's vast 6,000-year civilization was already resplendent when your people and mine were swinging in the trees. The misunderestimation of Iran, as George W. Bush would put it, has been profound and fatal for the American empire. I've lived a long life, a long political life, and so there is nothing that I forget. I don't forget the helicopters clattering off the roof in what was then called Saigon, in the ultimate emblem, icon of the defeat of the American empire in Southeast Asia. And hallelujah, I have lived long enough to see the end of the American empire in the Persian Gulf. When this war began, 6 weeks nearly ago, the Islamic Republic of Iran was ringed by American bases. Now there are none. Not a single American military base remains extant in the Persian Gulf. That means they're having to come from a long way away to deal their death and destruction on the schoolgirls, their mothers, their teachers, and the educational workers and healthcare workers and ordinary factory workers that they have massacred in their thousands to date. That long way away is precisely my country. The vast majority of American bombing raids in the last 2 weeks have set off from England's green and pleasant land. And so not only has Donald Trump destroyed his presidency for Israel, Keir Starmer has again destroyed his premiership for Israel. And if he's not yet aware of it, it's only a few weeks now until the local elections drive the nails into the political coffin of Keir Starmer. And if the lid doesn't quite shut later this month, the trial of the Romanian rent boys, the Ukrainian rent boys, some of them with Romanian citizenship, but all of them born within the borders of what is now Ukraine, they are on trial having pled not guilty to the allegations made by the Crown that they arsoned the front door and the former house and the former motor car of the British Prime Minister. I have to be careful for legal reasons. The trial is imminent. So let me just say, I and millions of others will be watching that trial very carefully indeed, to see just what it was that these Ukrainian rent boys had against the current British Prime Minister. What it was, what gripe, what grudge they could possibly have developed against him if these
I had no idea about that.
allegations are true, and the men deny them, and they're entitled to a fair trial. Britain is on trial throughout the whole theatre. The Lebanese resistance just fired a missile at a Royal Navy warship off the coast of Lebanon, and they hit it. It has been damaged. How severely, we don't yet know. Neither do we know why the Royal Navy had a warship off the coast of Lebanon, whilst an Israeli invasion of Lebanon is yet again ongoing. We don't know if they were there to pick up, I don't know, radical clerics that had fled there, as they have done in the past. Maybe they were on a humanitarian mission, although the kind of warship it appears to have been probably mitigates against that. We don't know if they were spotting for the Israeli murderers, as they did throughout the conflict in Gaza, which killed and maimed hundreds of thousands of refugees in the teeming refugee camps of Gaza. We don't know because they won't tell us. They won't tell us why they were off the coast of Lebanon. They didn't tell us why they were setting off from the sovereign base in Cyprus just at the time that Israel was mercilessly bombarding women and children, including latterly in their tents. That's the kind of democracy that my country has now become. We'll give you more on the developing situation of the Royal Navy ship struck by Hezbollah off the coast of Lebanon in the last hour. I can say no more about it, for that would be a criminal offence in Britain. That's the kind of democracy that my country has become. But what of the democracy of the United States of America? How much longer are you going to put up with this farce? Your president, in foul, profane, vulgar, but properly typed, punctuated, and spelt, unusually, in his Truth Social post this morning, didn't just invoke the name of Allah on Easter Sunday. He didn't just curse and swear on Easter Sunday, to the discomfiture of no Christian evangelical that I have yet seen reported. He threatened war crimes, but worse than war crimes, if there can be such a thing. They were war blunders. He said that on Tuesday he was going to destroy all of Iran's power plants, which is, of course, a war crime, explicitly delineated as such by international law, by the laws of war, and by the Geneva Conventions. But it's worse than a crime. It's a blunder. Because the only possible outcome could be that Iran will destroy the power plants of every single one, bar Qatar, which has seen sense and ordered American forces off of its land, but every other one that is still harboring American weapons, American men, and American warplanes and missiles, every other Arab Gulf country will then have its power plants destroyed. And if the damage Iran sustains is serious enough, their desalination plants also, in countries that depend on desalination for up to 95% of their water. What did these slave satraps do to deserve this hatred from your president? They have invested, according to Trump, we never actually get to see the money, like the money of the Board of Peace, $1.25 billion of which was transferred this day from the American Treasury to an account in Qatar in Donald Trump's personal name. Are you idiots, you Americans?
Wow.
I mean, how stupid can you be? He's been grifting all of his life, but now he's just taking it. But according to Trump, they've invested trillions of dollars in your economy. According to Trump, they gave him diamonds and pearls. We saw the 747 aircraft that he left his recent trip to the Gulf on. Gifted, he clearly told us, not to the United States, but to him personally. These countries have not just not received the protection that they were paying in the protection racket for. They are now about to be obliterated. Life, human life, even the life of the camels of the Arabian Gulf is about to be brought to an end by the destruction of the civilian infrastructure promised by Donald Trump in that Truth Social post on Easter Sunday. But then there won't be much point in human life in the Arabian Gulf. In fact, there won't be any human life in the Arabian Gulf. Once there's no desalinated water, there will be a mass outflow, not just of rich Arabs, but of the millions of Asian workers, semi-slaves in some cases, who wait on them hand and foot. Where do you think they're going, Mr. Europe? Where do you think they're headed, Mr. Farage? You half-wits. But there won't be any point anyway, whether you've got enough bottled water to last you a month or 6 months, because Israel has repeatedly bombed the nuclear power plant in Iran, which Russia has just evacuated all of its personnel from. So dangerous has the situation become that a radiation emergency is virtually inevitable. Time after time, crazed, unhinged, Israel has been bombing a nuclear reactor. And it's to Israel I now turn. This is 2026, not 1926. By imposing the most condign regime of sanctions and penalties on anyone releasing video and pictures of the punishment now being suffered every single day and every single night. The nighttime pictures are more spectacular, but the daytime punishment is just as severe. Israel is a country of 9 million people, 1 million of whom have already gone back to the countries they hold passports from. The rest would go back if they could. Scores of thousands have fled to Cyprus with every intention of setting up home there. 300,000 are headed for Patagonia, which had been helpfully set on fire in raging forest fires, reducing the value of the land somewhat. Milei, the president of Argentina, his real name is Mileikowski. He said he converted to Judaism, but in fact, it's Judaism from which he came. And he has set in motion a process where 300,000 Israelis will become citizens of Patagonia. A new PLO may very well emerge. As a matter of fact, scholars will know that Israel was very nearly in Patagonia in the first place, instead of in the Holy Land. Milei is going to take 300,000. Greece, in the Greek islands, the Israelis are trying to buy. Cyprus, where they're just landing on the beach like refugees, will soon be one of an archipelago of little Israels. Israel is a country that was 9 million people, but is rapidly declining. And no amount of censorship can disguise the incredible damage that is being done to Tel Aviv, to Haifa, to the oil storage, to the military-industrial complex, to the military intelligence industrial complex, to factories, to the very means of the life that the Israeli people have been able to enjoy. And so, Donald Trump is decolonizing Palestine. I'm beginning to wonder whether he's a secret agent on our side. Certainly, if I'd been advising him to do the maximum damage to the power of the American empire, I'd have advised him to do exactly what he has been doing in your name, on your dime, with quite a few $1 billion in the back pocket of him, his family, and his friends. Larry Johnson's coming up next. He knows everything about war and the politics of it. Stay tuned.
U.S. Special Forces launched a historic combat search and rescue mission 200 kilometers deep.
All right, I just like to keep it really diverse. This guy's content necessarily isn't. His content isn't necessarily what I always what I'm interested in, but I think it's important to have a diverse knowledge of what people are saying.
deep inside of Iran. It involves hundreds of commandos on the ground, and we'll see how these troops even built a temporary forward operating base inside of Iranian soil. So today, we're going to analyze the tactics behind how they rescued them, why more U.S. aircraft are suddenly being shot down over Iran, despite U.S. officials saying that they have unchecked air dominance, and we'll examine why the war is now entering a new, more dangerous phase. I'm your average infantryman and war correspondent, Chris Cappy. Let's find out. It all started on April 3rd when an F-15 Eagle aircraft was shot down on a bombing run over southern Iran by a surface-to-air missile. After a month of fighting, it was the first aircraft lost to enemy fire while flying a combat mission. Both of the U.S. aircrew ejected out of the cockpit over hostile territory. This sent out a beacon of their last known location to CENTCOM. The pilot and the weapons system officer parachuted down and landed in the mountainous terrain of southern Iran in the Boyar Ahmed province, but they were separated during the landing. The race to find them was on instantly. The Iranian IRGC launched a massive search effort to capture them. At the same time, the U.S. launched a combat search and rescue mission deep behind enemy lines to rescue them. In the U.S. military, they will move heaven and earth. They will risk multiple other aircraft just to come and find you. You will not be abandoned. The downed F-15 pilot landed and was quickly able to signal to the rescue crew with his location. Commanders sent in an HC-130J, a special fixed-wing aircraft that flew extremely low over the town. Its job is to act as the command and control for the rescue mission. By flying low, it avoids radar and long-range air defense missiles. This video, taken from the ground, shows the C-130 taking enemy fire. They deployed decoy flares that saved them at the last second. The C-130 also acts as a floating gas station. We see here it's refueling the two HH-60W Jolly Green combat rescue helicopters, all while in dangerous contested airspace. These special helicopters are equipped with special electronics that zero in on the pilot's location of the downed pilot's beacon. Overhead, the A-10 Warthogs provide close air support gun runs. Early reports indicate that inside these two helicopters were a platoon of heavily armed Air Force Special Forces pararescuemen. Once they landed, these ground forces jumped out and provided covering fire. They shot any enemy in sight. Then, the special operators loaded up the downed pilot and they took off. As the combat search and rescue team was exfiltrating, though, both helicopters took small arms fire, according to U.S. officials. The equipment was damaged, some of the aircrew were injured, but they made it out of Iran and back to base alive. But here is where the story gets absolutely insane. The second F-15 crew member, a colonel, a weapons system officer, or WSO, was still missing deep inside of Iran, and the airspace was now too dangerous to do the same kind of recovery mission. You couldn't fly slow, vulnerable aircraft overhead during the day anymore. To further confuse things, though, many of the US government have been saying for weeks that the war is already won. They've made statements that the war is as good as over, and that the airspace is totally in control and dominated. These statements, I think, have confused the public and created unrealistic expectations of how wars are really fought. The IRGC had set up air defense ambush points. According to a senior U.S. official who spoke to the New York Times about the mission, when the second downed airman landed, at first he hid in a mountain crevice. His location was unknown to both the Americans and the Iranians trying to capture him. The airman was wounded from the violent ejection where he pulled 15 Gs, but he could still walk. He had a personal weapon system and a recovery beacon that he recovered from the ejection seat. If you look at the 3D map of where the rescue took place, you can see it's in this deep valley between mountain ranges. There are several nearby villages here, and there's a city with a population of over 100,000 people, many of them searching for this pilot. At this point, the Central Intelligence Agency ran a deception campaign, according to U.S. officials. They put out misinformation inside of Iran to try to fool them into thinking the airman had already been rescued and was moving out of the country inside of a ground convoy. It was the CIA that also ran what's known as Unconventional Assisted Recovery, UAR. This is a broader term for their efforts to engage with the local civilians, either by infiltrating on the ground or through signals. As you can see here in this diagram from a study on how UAR works, this is essentially the same strategy used. They landed outside the high-threat air defense bubble around the downed pilot, and they brought the pilot outside that bubble to exfiltrate. The agency contacts civilians who shelter the downed airmen. This team helps facilitate the rescue. This protocol has been used since the 1950s, and it came out of lessons that were learned from World War II and the Korean War when it came to unconventional means for rescuing forces. The way UAR works is they send in teams on the ground before search and rescue even starts. These UAR teams stay behind enemy lines, and they meet up with the pilot. Often they are friendly forces like Kurdish units that are positioned on the ground in advance. Through these unique means, the CIA officer found the airman's hiding position, and they passed that information along to the Pentagon. You can see here on the live conflict map, it's already been geolocated where the rescue mission took place. The Pentagon then stood up one of the Special Forces' largest and most complicated rescue operations in history. This episode's sponsor is Ground News, and I'll use their platform to analyze this related story about how the Pentagon is weighing diverting Ukraine military aid to the Middle East. I love that Ground News gives me the fast, objective facts right up front, so the Pentagon notified Congress that they might be diverting $750 million to restock U.S. inventories instead, which is raising European concerns. Balancing competing global security demands creates this kind of significant trade-off. With my Vantage plan, Ground News tells me that the majority of the 80 sources on this story are all left-leaning, which means that the right might have totally missed this story. It tells me which sources are high in factuality so I avoid fake news, and it tells me that 9% of these sources are owned by private equity, which is known for having less investment in journalism. This is link in the description. Is a shot and find missing troops behind enemy lines. The pararescueman motto is, these things we do that others may live. It's a promise to the US, to its troops, that no man will be left behind. Meanwhile, the airman used this SEER training known as Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. He hiked up 7,000-foot high elevated ridgeline and activated his beacon, according to US officials. At this point, CENTCOM had a lock on his position, and according to officials briefed on the mission, the airman had a beacon and secure communications device to talk to them. He had to restrict the use of these, though, because they could also be picked up by the Iranian forces. This allowed the airmen to coordinate with the US Special Forces. Meanwhile, Iranian state TV announced a bounty on the aircrew equivalent to $64,000 for any intelligence leading to the capture of the pilots alive. That's like many years of salary to people living here. We know that the IRGC was closing in on the position because they posted photos of the wreckage of the F-15, and they found one of the officers' ejection seats. A mixed signal was sent on the screen, instructing people to shoot the aircrew if they saw them. The American aircrew would be used as leverage in negotiations.
That's also many years of salary to a lot of United Statesian wage slaves. A lot of people make like $15,000 a year, or sometimes even less. So it's like, you know, these settlers say stuff like that, but it's also like when you take a look at a full step back look, especially from an Arab perspective, is that yeah, wow, that's just silly. $65,000 is still years of salary for a lot of wage slaves in the United States.
Or paraded as propaganda on TV, or worse. Early reports indicate that local tribesmen helped keep the airmen safe. This is because, luckily for the WSO, the airmen, this part of southern Iran is not friendly to the IRGC. Videos started going viral online of what appeared to be Iranian people crowding the streets, blocking Iranian forces from making their way to the downed pilot. These tactics of the downed airmen working with locals to survive are all learned in SEER training. It's a mysterious, highly classified school shrouded in mystery in the US military. SEER teaches troops how to live off the land and evade capture. Battalions from the IRGC at this point are now converging on where the airman was hiding. They had seen the search and rescue crews circling overhead in the area, and they had descended upon it. Because of this, it increased the risk of the mission and complicated the rescue efforts. That's why the US deployed hundreds of American commandos from every branch. Reportedly, Delta Force, Green Berets, SEAL Team 6 all were sent in, and they were prepared for a contested rescue. The way they sent in hundreds of troops, they needed to have a large transport aircraft. So they constructed what's called a FARP, 200 kilometers deep inside of Iran. This is a forward-armed refueling point. It's done by clearing a stretch of land or commandeering an airstrip and then flying in transport aircraft. This OSINT account that broke some of the information reported that they landed on this geolocated agricultural runway here near Shariza. This is where they can refuel the aircraft in remote locations when air-to-air refueling is too dangerous. It's also where ground forces could move in on foot or in smaller Little Bird helicopters flown by elements of the 160th SOAR, as we'll see. Setting up a FARP is a highly specialized job. Of the entire US Air Force, there's only 63 qualified FARP team members. They do this with minimal equipment and personnel to keep that low footprint. If they'd stayed there another 48 hours, they probably would have had a green bean coffee shop there. A lot of people are asking, how is it that an F-15 gets downed, but slow-flying C-130s and helicopters could survive during the day? The US military opened up a small window of opportunity inside of Iran here. The way they accomplished this was by massing all their efforts from cyber warfare to space-based systems to airstrikes to electronic warfare, all on this one single province. This overwhelming force made it so that the US presence could not be contested during this limited window of time. It was localized air superiority, and it was set up near the Isfahan nuclear site just south of there. The US setting up a base deep inside of Iran near here represents a major security failure for the IRGC. What they did was they actually commandeered this runway for C-130s to fly in hundreds of these special forces. If they were spotted or their cover blown, Iran would have fired attack drones and ballistic missiles at their location. Since it was night, the American commandos moved out to rescue the remaining airmen. Early reports indicate they flew at least 2 Little Bird helicopters to the mountaintop area to rescue the airmen. Our understanding of how it worked is they flew 200 kilometers from where the airfield was south of Isfahan to these coordinates here where the downed airman was, and these are based on geolocated coordinates. It's also consisted with the tactics we mentioned earlier of unconventional assisted recovery, where you exfiltrate from outside the alerted area, pretty much exactly like how any Metal Gear Solid 5 mission works, come to think of it. Most of Iran's forces do not have night vision goggles, so these operators would have the advantage now. U.S. military officials speaking to the New York Times and other sources state that the commando team opened fire with their weapons to keep Iranian forces away from the rescue site. They unleashed a heavy hail of suppressing fire on the Iranian forces. Roads leading to the point of contact were just absolutely taken out and demolished, causing massive traffic jams as Iranian forces tried to respond. Footage taken by Iranians on the ground that night and uploaded online showed an intense gun battle. Flares were in the sky dropping down, explosions left and right. There's more cell phone footage showing dead Basiji militiamen that I can't show here, but it's on Pepperbox. Reaper drones overhead fired missiles at any armed military-age man within 3 kilometers of where the pilot was hiding. They successfully reached the downed airman. The airman was injured but alive. From here, we know from the early reports that they were taken back by the Little Bird helicopter to the FARP, that makeshift runway, and the C-130s were waiting to fly all of them out. 2 of the C-130s' wheels were either stuck in the loose sand or they were damaged by enemy fire with no time to repair them. What we know is the IRGC was descending on their location, so US commanders at CENTCOM made the decision to fly in 3 more transport aircraft to evacuate everyone. Delta Force reportedly blew up 2 of the C-130s in place so that the sensitive equipment in them wouldn't be recovered by Iran, and the pair of MH-6M Little Bird helicopters were also blown in place. They could have been too damaged to take back as well. The War Zone pointed out that they could have been flown inside of those C-130s to begin with, which would take a long time to break them down and then retransport them and recover them, so they may have been blown in place to save time. Or they could have been shot down by enemy fire. This part is unclear. But what we know is they then flew out of there on their new transports, and both aircrew had been safely recovered after one of the most intense 48 hours of combat search and rescue ever. Throughout history, the US has sacrificed many lives in the name of saving one person like this behind enemy lines. Why go through all that trouble? Part of this is psychological. You can fight deep inside of enemy lines, and you can fight outnumbered and surrounded on small remote patrol bases in the middle of nowhere if you're confident, if you know that your country will never leave you behind. But the story doesn't end there. It continues to get crazier. Just a few hours later, the IRGC uploaded footage. They were standing at the location where the forward operating base was blown in place. More photos were released of the FARP showing that it was still smoldering when the IRGC were there. These IRGC members later showed up at the scene, and Iran claimed that the aircraft had been downed by air defenses. It was still unclear what the truth was. During the combat search and rescue operation, they deployed A-10 Warthogs for close air support. These A-10s were sent deep into Iranian airspace that had not been cleared. These are called Sandy. They're specialized, qualified, and dedicated A-10 pilots that are trained in search and rescue procedures. Because of this increased risk of where they were flying and how low and slow they were flying, searching for these F-15 crew members, these aircraft were more exposed. During the rescue operation, an A-10 Warthog took enemy fire from Iranian military from what is believed to have been a surface-to-air missile that we'll get into more later, and the A-10 was able to make it back to friendly airspace after getting hit, and they ditched the equipment in the Persian Gulf, and they were quickly rescued out of the water and brought to Kuwait to be treated. But why are more US combat aircraft seemingly suddenly being shot down at higher rates like this? Almost 10 aircraft were destroyed in the past 72 hours of high-intensity combat. First, we need to put this into perspective. After a month of flying more than 15,000 sorties, hitting 13,000 different targets, flying deep all over Iranian airspace from east to west, this was the second US aircraft that was downed by enemy fire. All of Iran's air force has been destroyed or cannot take off at this point. In the Gulf War, remember, a total of 42 manned coalition aircraft were shot down by enemy fire in the first month. In the first weeks of the Iraq invasion in 2003, about 11 manned aircraft were shot down. Over 100 more were shot down during the insurgency phase, even with total air supremacy. Russia and Ukraine each lost roughly 70 manned aircraft to enemy fire just in the opening months of the war, and hundreds more since then. The US has roughly 2,800 combat aircraft across the Air Force, Navy, and Marines. In a war, losing 2 aircraft is considered negligible losses. Adding in the total US aircraft damaged, destroyed on the ground so far, and add up losses of equipment, and it represents 10 manned aircraft about, it represents an expensive but insignificant loss. It is a shock that more have not been shot down. However, just because the US is winning tactically so far does not mean that they're winning strategically. The Iranian regime is still in power, and by all accounts, they're even more hardline now than before, which makes things worse, and the IRGC maintain the ability to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, which is a strategic operational objective for the US. This is asymmetric warfare. Iran does not need to win militarily to win the political objectives of the war. To get into why the skies are becoming more dangerous, though, there are several reasons that I've observed. The initial wave of airstrikes killed the majority of Iran's top political leadership and military leadership. This made coordinating an initial effective air defense for Iran very difficult. None of the air defense batteries were getting orders. After the first few weeks of the bombing campaign, an estimated 80% of Iran's air defense was believed to be destroyed. Those initial estimates, including air defense systems of all types, radars, and additional detection means, but 20% still remained. Much of it is hidden in underground bunkers. By late March, something started to change in the air campaign over Iran. We saw footage of anti-air missiles getting closer to hitting a US F-18 aircraft. More than a dozen unmanned Reaper drones were destroyed, each costing $30 million each. And an F-35 was hit in a glancing blow. Iran was starting to put up more of a well-coordinated resistance. They had figured out ways to operate their air defense without their top leadership. In war, you use what's called tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs. TTPs are your method of attacking. It's your whole strategy. These TTPs, though, they evolve based on what your adversary does. They're never locked in place. When one way of fighting is ineffective, you switch to a different way and test that. Iran is now switching to an unconventional method. If Iran observed, for instance, that the US aircraft's TTP, when being radar locked by a longer range S-300, is to drop down low to an altitude below 20,000 feet, that would create an opening to fire their new Majid truck mounted system that hits up to 26,000 feet. This is believed to be responsible for damaging the F-15 and the F-35. This uses a passive IR, or heat-seeking missile. This missile gives no radar lock, no warning to pilots. They are often unable to evade or deploy countermeasures, usually. The IRGC in Iran is adapting their tactics based on more than a month of observing thousands of US flight patterns and tactics. They've studied the most common ingress and egress routes, and they have positioned ambush teams there. The F-15E and most aircraft do have what's called a missile warning system that detects plumes from these type of systems once they're launched, though. But some of the aircraft don't have that system, and they rely on radar only for missile warnings. A month is a long enough time span also for China and Russia to funnel in more advanced types of anti-air systems into Iran. There are unconfirmed reports of Russian S-500 air defense arriving in Iran this past month. And complacency can also creep into even the best soldier or airman. High mission tempo rates can also put strain on pilots and equipment, reducing effectiveness. Controlling the skies without ground forces will become even more difficult in the next few weeks. The way to understand how air superiority and air control really works is understanding the 4 official degrees of air control in US military doctrine. A lot of politicians and lawmakers and journalists do not understand these, but they're important. The lowest level of air control in a war is called air parity. In this, neither side controls the air. Both sides can operate in the sky. Both sides can interfere with each other with comparable or almost equal effectiveness. There is high risk for everyone. An example of this is the war in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine. The second type is called favorable air situation. This means you're likely careful about the type of targets that you choose, and you might cancel flight missions altogether because the risk is too high. Then there is air superiority. This is when you're basically able to fly anywhere in the airspace. This is what they currently have. There are still effective threats, but it won't stop you from running the mission to begin with. The final type is called air supremacy. This is what the US had in Iraq and Afghanistan for many years. This is where there's still threats, but they're sporadic and totally ineffective. Gaining air supremacy is difficult without any ground troops, which is likely why we're seeing thousands of US paratroopers have now already been moved into the Middle East and Saudi Arabia. And interestingly, we're seeing that they're being moved and housed in hotels and office spaces instead of big bases. The soldiers are living in safe houses distributed in the public among civilians. This is what large-scale combat operations in the modern age look like, more similar to what you would have seen in World War II. When I reported in Ukraine, every soldier I saw stayed in apartments, in houses, and in basements at the front line. They do not stay at any large bases with flags on the top, and the same is true for Russian soldiers. Small patrol bases will not be possible in this new form of warfare. With long-range precision missiles and drones, the way to survive is to push out of bases and not be seen. The escalation of the air war continues, though. By early April, the air campaign entered a new phase. This is the B-2 bridge in Iran, the largest in the country. The Islamic Republic of Iran invested the equivalent of over $400 million into its construction over many months. Once finished, next month, it will connect Tehran to a neighboring city, cutting traveling time. On April 2nd, the US Air Force destroyed it with JDAM bombs. This is the next phase of the air campaign that we're seeing here. Part of the reason why this is done is to go against Iranian propaganda, to show people in the streets that the US Air Force has total control here. It's a way of putting fear into the population as well. Many online were quick to say that it was a war crime, while others said that it was a strategic target. They'll be targeting the country's power plants and civilian infrastructure. This can be done with graphite bombs that were used in the war in Iraq that shut down transformers temporarily, turns off electricity. These are carried in missiles and bombs and are dispersed thousands of these ultra-fine carbon graphite filaments that spread in the air. They land on the short-circuit power stations. This is easy to remove and fix, though. So if the power plants are bombed, if we see that happen, that would turn off the power for much longer. The air war retaliation from Iran has also escalated. Iran expanded their target set, striking Kuwait's desalination plants that they rely on for fresh water. How long can Iran continue these missile attacks? A new report from US intelligence actually assessed that 50% of Iran's ballistic missile system remains intact. Keyword intact. This appears to go against the Israeli claims that 60% have been destroyed, and it's higher than many expected. Digging past the headline, though, it gets more complicated. The ISW reports that intact does not mean combat effective. There's a higher percentage than that are combat ineffective due to being buried and unable to be recovered from underground storage. A CNN report found that 75% of missile tunnel entrances were destroyed. IRGC members willing to risk going to launch sites has also rendered more of them combat ineffective as well. It's the psychological aspect of not wanting to get cooked. What that means is Iran's ability to launch has been degraded by 90% since the start of the war, but it's not totally eliminated, and the IRGC still fires between 10 to 20 ballistic missiles a day. This all happens as the war is already unpopular in the US to begin with. Even though most people do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, they don't want war with Iran as a solution to that problem. No matter what, though, I'm glad the 2 air crew were found safe and they were rescued and there was no casualties in their rescue. This is a huge relief. It also shows how dangerous this war remains today. If you found this interesting, though, check out this video about how World War III has already begun, or this playlist on aircraft. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Stay safe out there. Ending transmission.
Alright. So, I guess we will move on to something else. I think I'm gonna run another stream with another name I spent most of this one watching politics. Although I did do some setting up of Hermes, and I have a couple other coding projects going on that I don't really want to share on stream. Or yeah, just because it's for myself and customers and stuff like that. But I am looking to, yeah, I'll be right back. I'm gonna rename the stream something more relative to mostly watching geopolitics and random nonsense, just so I don't pull. Um, I'm not distracting people too much. You should go learn about Andre Karpathy's outer research and OpenClaw and um, Hermes agent, and yeah, all important stuff. Just it's all, I'm passionate about this stuff, and I just want to make sure that I'm staying up to date about everything going on and able to keep up with the forefront, because I did kind of just avoid a software engineering degree. After my heavy equipment technology program, I was pursuing software engineering, but I feel like I really dodged one with the whole AI changeover. So, yeah, I'll see y'all soon. Bama peace.